Chapter 229. After spending half a day under Han Shuo's guidance, Dark Dragon Gilbert finally grasped this evil technique of harvesting yin to replenish yang. Gilbert, who was originally in disbelief, slowly started to have doubts as his body continued to transform. However, before he could confirm it, Gilbert did not dare believe that such a martial technique could have such a miraculous effect. Remember, you can only steal a bit of yin energy at a time. Too much and you'll die, Han Shuo cautiously reminded after Gilbert had completely grasped the technique. If this evil technique of harvesting yin to replenish yang could be used appropriately, and only absorb a bit of yin energy from a woman's body at a time, it wouldn't cause too much harm to the woman's body. However, if it was used excessively and absorbed too much yin energy, it would harm the woman's body. In serious cases, it could even cause death. Under Han Shuo's repeated reminders, Gilbert seemed to understand, but not quite. He grumbled. Got it, it's hard to say if it's useful or not. I'll tell you after I try it. Afterwards, Han Shuo and Gilbert made a trip to the Dwarves' Valley. Leaving Gilbert outside, Han Shuo went in and had a chat with village chief Calvin. He handed over the list of materials needed for forging weapons to Calvin, and only left the valley after the negotiations were concluded. With Gilbert's presence, Han Shuo saved a lot of effort. Riding on Gilbert's back, the two flew towards the depths of the dark forest, towards the holy land where the forest troll lived. After flying for most of the day, Han Shuo and Gilbert arrived at the holy land of the forest troll, the place where the statue of the demon Dadera was worshipped. The forest troll guarding this place all recognized Han Shuo. No one stopped Han Shuo and allowed Han Shuo to enter freely, even shouldering the responsibility of protecting him. Even in the cold winter, the sacred land of the forest trolls in the place of extreme wood displayed a verdant and lush air of spring. Dense vegetation, tall shrubs, and ancient trees that reached into the sky all grew exceptionally strong and healthy. Colorful flowers bloomed all over the sacred mountain valley, and the air was filled with a fresh and mellow fragrance. As far as the eye could see, it was all green and full of vitality. All the plants were so perfectly grown, so unbelievably strong. There were even some exotic flowers and plants that even Han Shuo had never heard of before. Any plant would grow very well in the place of extreme earth. Thick earth yuan-chi filled the surroundings, and towering ancient trees covered the horizon. The old branches intertwined with each other, strong and powerful. This was why the holy land of the forest troll could be built on top of these tree trunks. After arriving here, Han Shuo first had some of the surrounding forest troll temporarily evacuate from this area of the holy land. He then leapt into the air and observed the feng shui of the 5 elements from above. He carefully identified the place according to the descriptions in Chu Kanglin's memories before landing on the roots of an ancient tree. This ancient tree was the tallest and most ancient tree in the place of extreme earth. It was more than 10 meters tall, and its dense branches and leaves were all green. It radiated vitality and looked quite old. After staring at the largest ancient tree for a while, Han Shuo finally said apologetically, I'm sorry, you've occupied the best spot. You'll have to hand over the earth yuan-chi you've absorbed bit by bit. I can only sacrifice you. As he spoke, Han Shuo's thoughts moved and a beam of divine light flew out of his body, landing in Han Shuo's palm. Han Shuo then began to dig at the thick roots of the ancient tree without hesitation. Honored Master, do you need my help? Gilbert volunteered when he saw that Han Shuo had begun to dig at the roots of the ancient tree the size of a small mountain. After thinking for a bit, Han Shuo nodded and stopped what he was doing. He said, I don't need your help. But you've reminded me that I don't need to do anything myself with the Earth Elite Zombie here. Han Shuo chanted a necromancy incantation as soon as he finished speaking. The 2 dark creatures, the Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie, were simultaneously summoned by Han Shuo. The Little Skull's bones were as translucent as jade, and a faint spiritual light circulated within his purple demon eye. He stood there with the bone dagger in his hand, and actually gave off a strong killing aura. The 7 bone spurs on his back gave off an extremely sinister and dangerous feeling, as if they were 7 lethal weapons. The Earth Elite Zombie's eyes sparkled with an earthy yellow light that was the same color as his body. The armor that covered his entire body was like a thick layer of yellow earth. He was blinking his eyes at this moment, looking at Han Shuo with confusion. He seemed to be saying, "Everything's fine, why did you suddenly call me over?" From the appearance of the little skull and the Earth Elite Zombie, Han Shuo discovered that the two seemed to be constantly evolving. The little skull in particular gave Han Shuo an indescribable feeling. He always felt that after his intelligence was unlocked, his actions became more and more assertive, as if he already had a strange momentum. "I'll give you a mission. Dig out 49 holes of various sizes in this area according to my wishes. In addition, use ditches to connect the holes." Han Shuo mused for a moment and spoke to the Earth Elite Zombie, who was blinking his eyes. The well-behaved Earth Elite Zombie nodded naively, blinking his eyes at Han Shuo. However, he didn't immediately take action, seeming to wait for Han Shuo's more specific instructions. Han Shuo immediately reacted after staring blankly. He sat down cross-legged and organized his memories in his mind. His brain was like a marvelous machine, first projecting the entire area of the place of extreme wood into his mind. He then divided the 49 holes of various sizes according to Chu Kanglin's memories, placing them on the scene of the place of extreme earth in his mind. When Han Shuo finished all this, he had a complete picture of the entire scene in his mind. He then issued an order, and the Earth Elite Zombie immediately descended into the ground. Suddenly, the ground of the entire place of extreme wood began to churn violently, as if a wriggling earth dragon was continuously moving about underground. In the blink of an eye, the earth quaked and the mountains swayed. Mounds of earth appeared one after another. The Earth Elite Zombie's body was like a small dragon wantonly tossing and turning in the surging waves of the ocean. Every time he emerged from the earth, a hole of various sizes would appear. Accompanied by loud rumbling sounds, the Earth Elite Zombie used a miraculous method to perform a feat that even the most skilled construction worker couldn't accomplish. He completely relied on his own strength and natural control of the yuan energy of Earth to perfectly construct the scene in Han Shuo's mind. In the short span of half an hour, the entire ground of the place of extreme wood had undergone earth-shattering changes. 49 caves of various sizes appeared, not one more or one less. Hundreds and thousands of gullies connected the 49 caves like a winding mountain range. There wasn't the slightest difference from the scene in Han Shuo's mind. It was exactly the same. Only the Earth Elite Zombie, who had reached the pinnacle of mastery of the yuan energy of Earth, would be able to accomplish such a feat in such a short amount of time, and with the strength of a single person. Miraculous, truly miraculous. This fellow is too amazing. Gilbert looked at the Earth Elite Zombie with wide eyes. In such a short amount of time, he'd created such earth-shattering changes. He looked at the Earth Elite Zombie as if he'd seen a ghost and praised him. "Now you know how amazing it is. The Earth Elite Zombie is the darling of the Earth. As an assassin, he can hide underground and escape through the earth if his attack fails. Even if someone dodges his attack, they won't be able to catch him." Han Shuo laughed heartily and looked askance at Gilbert. After completing all this, the Earth Elite Zombie's body rose from the last large hole. The thick earth was like air, unable to obstruct his body in the slightest. It was as if he'd floated out of the water, creating a bizarre visual impact. He took out a large pile of materials from his space ring and filled the empty space in front of him, piling them up like a small mountain. Then, using his connection with the Earth Elite Zombie with the little skull, Han Shuo, together with the Earth Elite Zombie and the little skull, quickly shuttled back and forth between the large and small holes, placing the various materials that were as high as a small mountain into the holes one by one in a special order. After finishing all this, Han Shuo let out a long sigh and said, "All the materials have been placed in. Currently, only the most basic thing is left. Why is that hole empty? Nothing has been placed in it?" Gilbert looked at everything that was happening with great interest. As soon as Han Shuo finished speaking, he looked around and discovered that in the center of the 49 holes, there was a hole the size of a person. It happened to be right next to where Han Shuo was standing, which was also the root of the oldest and tallest tree in the area. Nonsense, that hole is the center of the formation. Naturally, only the master can enter it. Han Shuo rolled his eyes at Gilbert, and casually explained. Han Shuo started chanting a magical incantation as soon as he'd finished speaking, summoning a few zombie warriors. He planned on using the same method and letting them fight it out to decide who would be the most suitable candidate to be chosen. However, just as Han Shuo was about to do so, the Earth Elite Zombie hurriedly shook his hand and walked in front of Han Shuo. He quickly blinked his earthy yellow eyes and anxiously explained something to Han Shuo. As he did so, he didn't forget to wave his hand at the little skull and communicate with the little skull with joy. It seemed that he wanted the little skull to persuade Han Shuo with him. Han Shuo was surprised. He then held his breath and focused his mind. He carefully sized up the Earth Elite Zombie and the little skull while slowly comprehending the message the two transmitted. The Earth Elite Zombie seemed to know what Han Shuo was planning to do. He constantly gestured with his hands in disagreement, then communicated with the little skull. The little skull also seemed to suddenly come to his senses and join the resistance with the Earth Elite Zombie. A short and chaotic message was continuously transmitted from the two to Han Shuo's mind. After a while, Han Shuo looked at the two in amazement and asked, "You mean you two will choose a suitable person?" The Earth Elite Zombie and Little Skeleton both nodded ferociously as soon as he'd finished speaking. The little skeleton walked up to the zombie warriors and clenched his bony claws into fists, pounding them with a series of crackling sounds. The zombie warriors that Han Shuo had summoned were all beaten into a prostrate position on the ground. Then, the little skull stood in front of the zombie warriors and proudly gestured something with his head held high and chest puffed out. It seemed to be saying that these guys weren't good enough and that they weren't worthy of such magical treatment. Han Shuo looked for a while and finally understood. He nodded and said with a smile, "All right, I'll send you two back. I'll give you a few minutes. Then, you two grab a zombie warrior of your choice and I'll try to summon you two together." The little skull and the Earth Elite Zombie nodded vigorously in unison when they heard Han Shuo's words. Han Shuo could feel the joy and excitement in their hearts. Han Shuo laughed involuntarily and gave them a reminder. He chanted an incantation and sent the two fellows back to their homes. His heart was full of surprise, as he hadn't thought that the little skeleton and Earth Elite Zombie would have such strange reactions. How can such low-level dark creatures possess intelligence? Gilbert was baffled as he looked at Han Shuo and sighed. Next time, don't talk about low-level dark creatures in front of them. Otherwise, they'll definitely be angry and might even beat you up. Now that they've surpassed the scope of dark creatures, I think that even high-level dark creatures may not possess such magical powers. Han Shuo glanced at Gilbert, and warned the nonsensical Gilbert. After a while, Han Shuo sensed the little skull's call from an extremely distant plane. He chanted necromancy magic again and began to summon the two who had just left. A beam of light flashed by. The little skull and the Earth Elite Zombie were carrying a thin and tall zombie warrior that looked like a bamboo pole. The zombie's face was dark green, and there was no light in its white pupils. It was obvious that it only possessed the simplest of obedience. The little skull and the Earth Elite Zombie were carrying the thin and weak zombie warrior at their waists. One shoulder was higher than the other, and the other was lower. Their silly expressions were quite comical. To Han Shuo's surprise, the little skull pointed at the thin and tall zombie warrior and gestured with one hand, as if to say, "He's one of us!" Chapter 230. Han Shuo was stunned for a moment. He stared blankly at the tall and thin zombie warrior, then his eyes shifted between Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie. Finally, he asked in amazement, "One of us? One of you?" Nodding their heads in unison, Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie looked rather pleased with themselves. They gestured something at Han Shuo with their empty hands, and pieces of messy information were transmitted into Han Shuo's mind like electric waves. After a while, Han Shuo sorted out the pieces of information, and his heart was filled with shock. He looked at the two little fellows in disbelief and exclaimed, "You're saying that you have your own subordinates and forces in another world?" The two fellows puffed out their chests at the same time, their expressions extremely pleased. They looked as if they were cackling and nodding. It was obvious that Han Sha had hit the nail on the head. On the other side, Dark Dragon Gilbert watched as Han Sha slowly communicated with the two creatures. He also felt that it was unimaginable and couldn't help but let out an to express his astonishment. After recovering from his shock, Han Sha quickly thought about it and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Not bad, not bad. You've done a good job. With Han Sha's current understanding of necromancy magic, he clearly knew that as he continued to improve, he would one day be able to directly pass through the constraints of space and descend to that magical plane with Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie. In addition, if Han Sha reached the realm of a sacred Magus necromancer, he could even set up a large-scale transportation matrix to directly connect to the two worlds outside and transport soldiers. If Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie developed a powerful force in another plane, when Han Sha's necromancy magic reached a certain level, he would be able to share resources. This made Han Sha very excited. Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie were overjoyed to hear Han Sha's praise. Little Skull pointed at the zombie warrior he was carrying, then at the hole beside him, indicating that Han Sha would use this zombie warrior to refine it into a wood elite zombie that could use wood energy. Nodding his head, Han Sha smiled to express his understanding. He waved at Little Skull, indicating that he should drop the thin and tall zombie warrior into the hole. When Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie carried the zombie warrior to the hole, Little Skull put it down and raised his head to look at the zombie warrior. The purple light in his purple demon eye flickered continuously, as if he was issuing some order to the zombie warrior. After a while, Little Skull stood on his tiptoes and patted the zombie warrior's shoulder comically, like a general encouraging his subordinates, conveying the message of, "Do a good job." The thin and tall zombie warrior seemed to only have the intelligence to obey. After receiving the order from the purple demon eye, it nodded clumsily and stiffly, as if it understood Little Skull's meaning. It jumped into the hole and lay down obediently, looking at Han Sha with eager eyes, waiting for Han Sha's next move. Seeing that everything was in place, Han Sha took a deep breath and dripped 2 drops of blood essence into the zombie warrior's body with practiced ease. He then released a seal of darkness magic to form a deeper connection with the zombie warrior. Afterwards, Han Sha sat down cross-legged and gave an order to the Earth Elite Zombie. Rays of black light shot out from his hand and fell into the zombie warrior's body. Upon receiving Han Sha's order, the Earth Elite Zombie leapt into the soil as if diving into the water, disappearing in an instant like a loach. All that could be seen was an earth dragon wriggling around the entire scene. The 49 holes were quickly covered up and became flat, exactly the same as before. When Han Sha's last few hand seals fell into the body of the thin and tall zombie warrior, the soil around the hole seemed to be attracted by some kind of power, covering the zombie warrior's body in an extremely short amount of time. Then, the Earth Elite Zombie rose up from the ground and even clapped his hands, revealing an expression that said it was a piece of cake. "Would Aura obey my command and return immediately?" Han Sha formed a seal with both hands and roared. A ball of black light fell into the place where the thin and tall zombie warrior was. All of a sudden, the 49 caves that had been restored to their original state seemed to be connected by many green natural threads, forming a dense web that looked like it had been weaved by spiders. At the center of the web was the place where the tall and thin zombie warrior was hiding. In an instant, the rich earth yuan energy seemed to be connected by the many green ribbons, as all of it converged towards the center of the zombie. From afar, it looked like many small streams were converging towards the river in the center, giving off a strong visual impact. Some of the verdant weeds in the furthest distance slowly withered and turned yellow. Even the originally sturdy branches of the largest old tree seemed to slowly undergo changes that were difficult to see with the naked eye due to the loss of the earth aura. All of this was absorbed by the thin and tall zombie warrior in the center. For the sake of his existence, all of the surrounding greenery would eventually wither and die. This is truly miraculous. Master, how did you do this?" Dark Dragon Gilbert couldn't help but exclaim as he looked at the enormous changes that had taken place in the entire scene. All of the plants in the surroundings of the place of extreme wood will have to spit out the earth aura that they have absorbed over the years. The day the wood elite zombie takes form will also be the day their branches and leaves wither and turn yellow. They will be completely finished. Survival of the fittest. Every living thing in this environment is survival of the fittest. This is their fate, Han Shaw said callously. Gilbert looked around and finally fixed his gaze on the Earth Elite zombie and the little skull. What do we do now? Nothing. We'll leave this place and make a trip to the Forest Troll's residence. This place is guarded by the Forest Troll warriors, so there shouldn't be any problems. The changes here will become more and more obvious as time passes. I'll instruct the Forest Troll not to worry about it. When that zombie absorbs the wood aura here and becomes a wood elite zombie, he will naturally contact me. When that happens, I'll come over and wake him up. Han Shu explained faintly. Together with the little skull, Gilbert and the Earth Elite zombie, they left the perimeter of the place of extreme wood and headed straight for the village where the Forest Troll resided. After spending half a day, they arrived at the Forest Troll's village. The arrival of Han Shu and the little skull caused the Forest Troll's village to be brimming with a festive atmosphere. As their guardian deity, the little skull had already been seen as the embodiment of the great goddess Dadera in this world. The successful robbery last time, as well as Han Shu's large financial support for daily necessities, had caused the Forest Troll to trust Han Shu even more. The old priest of the Forest Troll arrived in front of Han Shu after a while with the help of his subordinates. He knelt down and cowed out to Han Shu and the little skull. "Hi, how have you been?" Han Shu asked with a smile after letting the old priest rise. "Under your wise guidance, we have enough rations to survive this winter. No merchants are willing to pass through the dark forest in the cold weather, so we've all been resting in the village and haven't gone out to hunt." The old priest responded respectfully, his expression somewhat relaxed. Nodding his head, Han Shu said in a harmonious voice, "Very good. Train well this winter and cultivate stronger warriors and priests for the race. When spring comes next year, you'll be able to put them to good use. We will definitely listen to the messenger's orders and train those children well." The old priest nodded and promised Han Shu. "Yes, during this period of time, send more warriors to protect the sacred ground. The great goddess Dadera may be recuperating inside for a period of time. Don't enter the sacred land without my orders. Everything that happens in the sacred land is caused by the great goddess Dadera. Don't make a fuss about it." Han Shu knew that the formation of the Wood Elite zombie would certainly cause changes in the area. He had to inform them in advance just in case the old priest and the others didn't understand the situation and disrupt Han Shu's arrangements. "Don't worry, we'll definitely follow the messenger's orders and guard the area closely." The old priest didn't ask for the reason and directly made a solemn vow. The old priest appeared quite relaxed when he didn't have to worry about food or clothing. "All right then. If there are any further instructions, I may come personally, or I may have this fellow pass it on." I think you know who he is." Han Shu smiled and pointed at Gilbert beside him. "Of course, this is the powerful Mr. Dark Dragon, your humble servant." The old priest had been with Han Shu during their last trip to the underground world. He had seen very clearly how the Dark Dragon had submitted and made a contract with Han Shu. He naturally understood the origins of Dark Dragon Gilbert. Seeing that everything that needed to be explained had been clearly explained, Han Shu didn't say anything else and left the Forest Troll's village. After sending Little Skull and the Earth Elite zombie back home, Han Shu rode Gilbert into the depths of the dark forest. There was a mysterious race in the depths of the dark forest, an extremely powerful and terrifying existence. Of course, such a place would naturally have even more ferocious magical beasts, some wondrous plants, and some legendary treasures. Han Shu planned on refining pills, so he wanted to try his luck in the depths of the dark forest. He wanted to see if he could find some wondrous spirit herbs and replenish some of his basic ingredients. After flying for a while on the Dark Dragon, Gilbert took the initiative to put Hanshaw down. He actually cried out with lingering fear. "There's really something wrong with this dark forest. I suddenly felt a chill run down my spine just now, as if something was treating me as prey. This is too inconceivable. Your feelings should be correct. Just now, I also felt a very powerful aura lock onto the two of us. However, I have no way of knowing where this powerful presence came from. It looks like this dark forest is indeed mysterious beyond compare. Let's not fly in the air, lest we attract the attention of some powerful creatures." When Hanshaw had felt that powerful presence, he had immediately released the 3 demons to scout the surroundings. However, Hanshaw had no way of identifying where this presence had come from. The 3 demons circled the surroundings and didn't discover anything out of the ordinary. This not only didn't make Hanshaw relax, but instead made Hanshaw even more cautious. Strangely, the depths of the dark forest didn't seem to be affected by the cold winter. The frigid winds disappeared as the two ventured deeper, and the temperature also gradually rose. It was a bit similar to the scene in the place of extreme wood. This place was lush and verdant, with ancient trees reaching the sky and dense shrubs. Springs gurgled along the way, and a few hot springs were scattered everywhere, with white mist rising in spirals. With the help of the demon's vision, Hanshaw saw all kinds of ferocious high-level magical creatures appear continuously in some places. Harpies, deep-water venom pythons, frost eagles, medusae, manticores, these rare high-level magical creatures continuously appeared in the demon's vision. Sometimes, it wasn't just 1 or 2. These high-level magical creatures were rarely seen in the outskirts of the dark forest. Often, there would only be one of these high-level magical creatures in a large area. Ordinary adventurers would flee in panic when they encountered them, deathly afraid of being ambushed. However, in the depths of the dark forest, they had become the most common of existences, and were no longer so rare and peculiar. In some special places, there were many strange flowers and plants that Hanshaw had never heard of or seen before. These strange flowers and plants grew enormous flower buds. Hanshaw saw through the demons that a wind-blade wolf would twist miraculously when it passed by a flower bud, instantly sucking the wind-blade wolf's body into its stamen. The thick roots chewed and sucked like a neck, quickly digesting the wind-blade wolf amidst the thick blood. Not even the bones were spat out. There were also some strange plants whose branches and leaves intertwined like human hands. They also possessed terrifying destructive power. Once a magical creature approached them, it would be wrapped around by their thick branches and strangled to death bit by bit. "Follow me and be careful. There are dangers everywhere in the dark forest. No wonder Trunks kept telling me that although the rewards would be greater the deeper we go, we could also lose our lives at any time." Hanshaw moved forward carefully and spoke calmly to Gilbert. However, Hanshaw himself lost his cool as soon as he'd finished speaking. His body shot out with a whoosh, and he rushed towards something with a face full of joy. Chapter 231. Within a crack in a fiery red rock, there was a plant with a large leaf the size of a cattail leaf, its entire body glowing with a translucent red light. At this moment, the strange plant with only one large leaf was dripping drop after drop of a blood-red liquid. This liquid was translucent, and as dazzling as red diamonds. However, as soon as it landed on the rock, it squeaked and emitted a blurry red mist. The mist dissipated at the roots, as if absorbed by the roots. Hanshaw's body was faster than Gilbert had expected. In the blink of an eye, he had bent over and opened his mouth, facing the dripping drops of red liquid. Drip, drip. The blood-red liquid landed on the tip of Hanshaw's tongue, emitting a soft sound. Every time a cloud of red mist rose with a squeak, Hanshaw would take a deep breath and inhale the mist into his body. Then, under Gilbert's gaze, Hanshaw's cheeks gradually turned red. For some reason, Gilbert looked at Hanshaw in astonishment. Looking at Hanshaw's strange actions, he felt that this master of his was becoming more and more mysterious. As drops of translucent blood dripped from the large leaf, the originally vigorous plant slowly began to take on a deep red color. It slowly fell onto the fiery red rock, merging with the color of the rock. When the large leaf the size of a cattail leaf stopped dripping the bright red liquid, this peculiar plant seemed to have turned into a hard rock and actually stuck to the rock below. At this moment, the skin all over Han Shuo's body became a bloody red. He immediately sat down where he was, looking like a man of blood. There was also a faint red mist curling around his body. After about an hour, Han Shuo slowly opened his eyes and let out a long, hearty howl. He said in high spirits, "The depths of the dark forest are indeed mysterious and unfathomable. To be able to find this blood essence grass that can increase one's blood essence, it looks like my luck is pretty good." "What's that?" Gilbert looked at the plant that looked like it had turned into a rock and asked in surprise. "The blood essence grass is a kind of evil plant. After it takes shape, it will constantly absorb the vitality of the surrounding plants. If the surrounding plants are man-eating evil plants, then the blood of these man-eating plants will be absorbed and refined through its rhizome. This process would last for 100 years. Only then would the blood essence grass grow a leaf the size of a cattail leaf. Once the leaf was formed, it would spit out the solidified blood that it had absorbed and refined for 100 years. Through its rhizome, the solidified blood would be absorbed again and completely fused with its rhizome. This would allow it to absorb the surrounding yuan qi faster and cover a greater distance. After another 100 years, the blood essence grass would absorb the essence qi of the surrounding man-eating plants and grow another leaf, repeating the process over and over again. If the blood essence grass can successfully evolve 9 times for 900 years, then it will become a blood essence that can move at will and possess intelligence like a human. All the plants within a 10-mile radius will be under its control and possess incredible powers." Han Shuo smiled and explained the origin of the blood essence grass to Gilbert. "So powerful? Then what effect does the blood-like liquid have on you? How many years does this blood essence grass have?" Gilbert asked in surprise after hearing Han Shuo's explanation. Laughing proudly, Han Shuo said, "After I absorb and refine the essence of this blood essence grass, it can directly transform my blood into blood essence with special effects. This will save me a lot of demonic yuan. Unfortunately, this blood essence grass seems to only have a lifespan of 300 years. If it had a lifespan of 900 years, after being transformed into my lifeblood essence, it would have the miraculous effect of bringing the dead back to life. Once my body is cut, it would heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. So miraculous! Perhaps there are other blood essence grasses in the dark forest. We can look for them." Gilbert was dazed for a while, and then exclaimed excitedly. Ignoring the excited Gilbert, Han Shuo summoned the demon's lair edge and carefully cut open the fiery red rock that the blood essence grass was entrenched in. He dug up the surrounding soil and finally put the fiery red rock into his space ring. "What use does this rock have?" Gilbert asked curiously. "This is a blood essence stone. It's a very precious material for refining weapons and has many uses." Han Shuo knew that Gilbert wouldn't understand if he explained too much, so he answered carelessly. Looking around, Han Shuo didn't see anything else worth paying attention to. He then walked deeper into the forest with Gilbert, becoming more and more curious about the dark forest. However, after walking for a while, that powerful presence appeared again, causing Han Shuo to frown involuntarily and stop where he was. "Who is it, or what is it? Are you done?" Han Shuo shouted rudely as he looked around coldly. A being with such a powerful presence, and able to avoid the detection of the 3 demons, even if it wasn't human, it must possess intelligence. Such a powerful being seemed to think of him and Gilbert as its prey. This feeling made Han Shuo feel very uncomfortable, and he couldn't help but shout. There was no response. The forest was silent. After listening for a while, there were no additional sounds. It looked like the powerful being hadn't responded to Han Shuo's words. "There's really something following us." Gilbert also instinctively sensed danger and couldn't help but say. Nodding, Han Shuo said softly, "That's right. I don't know what it is, but even I have no way of discovering its tracks. It looks like it's a powerful fellow. We need to be careful and not give it a chance to take advantage of us. No matter what this being was, if it had the confidence to deal with Han Shu and Gilbert, it wouldn't be hiding in the shadows like this. It might have used a strong offensive from the start to defeat Han Shu and Gilbert. This method of hiding meant that this powerful being didn't have the confidence to face the two of them head-on. It was precisely because of this that Han Shu didn't seem particularly flustered. With the existence of the three demons, it was completely unrealistic for this being to ambush them without making a sound. Therefore, although he was on guard, Han Shu wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he was filled with curiosity and decided to lure out this powerful being and see just what it was. Deep in the night, the clear moonlight shone down. The shadows of the towering ancient trees were reflected on the ground under the moonlight, like the figures of demons baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Han Shu and Gilbert were together on the branch of a 10-meter-tall tree. Gilbert leaned lazily against the tree and dozed off, looking like he'd already fallen into a deep sleep. Han Shu's body was ramrod straight, his breathing even and heartbeat slow, like a standing javelin. He sat cross-legged on the branch with his eyes closed, silently digesting the essence of the blood essence grass he'd absorbed during the day. After who knew how long, Han Shu, who was resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes shone brightly in the dark night as he surveyed his surroundings. The three demons circled around Han Shu's back and arms, observing all abnormalities in their surroundings. One of the demons on Han Shu's back suddenly discovered ripples in the middle of a pool not far away. Then, a huge transparent water figure slowly floated out of the pool. This water silhouette was enormous, no smaller than Gilbert's dragon form. Its enormous body had 9 slender, monstrous heads. After it emerged from the water, the originally faint and transparent water silhouette gradually became more and more indistinct, finally completely disappearing. However, an enormous aura faintly emanated from that direction. It was exactly the same as what Han Shu had sensed over the past 2 days. Han Shu observed for a while and discovered that the direction of the wind in that area had clearly become a bit strange, as if it had encountered an obstruction in the air. He nudged Gilbert, startling the sleeping dragon awake. He turned his head to look at his surroundings before asking in a small voice, "What did you discover?" "It's the super-rank magical beast, the Hydra!" Han Shu exclaimed softly. Gilbert's expression changed greatly at these words. He said in shock, "No wonder. According to my grandfather, the Hydra can skillfully use the power of water to cover its body, preventing others from seeing its whereabouts and entering a wondrous state of invisibility. The Hydra's entire body is filled with poison, and it also possesses great power. I didn't think that it would actually target the two of us. This Hydra should have only evolved once. No wonder it didn't dare to act rashly even though it had its eyes on us. Get ready, we'll show it what we're made of." Han Shu exclaimed softly, his body remaining motionless as he continued to sit there, waiting for the Hydra's arrival. Gilbert understood and pretended to continue sleeping, letting out light snores from his mouth. Chapter 232. Before the Hydra had even arrived, a foul stench accompanied by a powerful presence had already pounced in their direction. Even through the 3 demons, Han Shu still couldn't see the Hydra's figure, but he could still roughly guess its location through the strange changes in the wind. As the 9-headed serpent flew over, some of the clear water in the surroundings were instantly polluted, turning it into a stinky place that resembled a stinking ditch. The moist ground also slowly became abnormally dry, taking on a dark brown color. It looked like it had all been affected by the Hydra's power. Han Shu summoned the demon's lair edge, and had already made preparations with Gilbert as the Hydra approached. They planned to launch an attack when the Hydra got close and give it an unforgettable blow. The stench in the air grew stronger and stronger. Han Shu, who had been adjusting his breathing with his eyes closed, felt a brief dizziness when he first breathed in the stench, but his body quickly returned to normal after filtering it with his magical yuan. As a member of the evil dragon tribe, Gilbert's body was strong and tough, and he could also spit out acidic poison. The resistance of a dragon's body was strong enough that the stench of poison wouldn't be able to affect him before the poison landed on his body. Suddenly, the Hydra's moving figure seemed to stop beside a towering tree. The direction of the wind was stable and there were no abnormal changes, as if the Hydra had been stationed there. Han Shuo was surprised and was wondering why the Hydra hadn't approached when 4 streams of dark brown liquid sprayed out like fountains, shooting straight at the tree that Han Shuo and Gilbert were sitting on. A strong stench instantly filled the air. The stench was abnormally unpleasant, and when the magical beasts in the surroundings inhaled the stench, their bodies stiffened, and they became motionless. The higher-level harpies and the 2 wind-blade wolves all fled in terror when they smelled the stench, not daring to stay where they were. It was obvious that they knew that there was a terrifying danger in the surroundings. Cursing in a low voice, Han Shuo and Gilbert immediately moved. Gilbert's body leaped and landed on a tree further away, while Han Shuo soared into the air and stood there. During this process, Han Shuo took the opportunity to chant necromancy magic. Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie appeared at the same time, working together like heaven and earth. Little Skull was at Han Shuo's side, while the Earth Elite Zombie hid in the ground. The tree that Han Shuo and Gilbert had stopped at was washed by the 4 streams of dark brown liquid. The branches and leaves trembled violently, and all the lush green leaves and branches withered in an extremely short amount of time. The towering ancient tree looked as though it had experienced tens of thousands of years of withering, with only a withered old tree trunk remaining. "Hydra, you've finally come out!" Han Shuo laughed coldly in the air and attacked at the same time as Little Skull. The bone dagger and demon's lair edge whistled as they flew out, targeting the concealed Hydra. At the same time, Dark Dragon Gilbert's loud shouts sounded from the side. The human form of Gilbert gradually grew larger in a ball of black light, finally transforming into the form of a dark dragon. He bared his fangs and brandished his claws at the Hydra, shouting in a deep voice, "Despicable Hydra, you'll pay the price!" The concealed Hydra obviously hadn't expected that Han Shuo and Gilbert would be able to see through its tracks. Before it could react, Han Shuo's demon's lair edge and bone dagger had already struck its body. A sharp cry tore through the silent sky. The injured Hydra could no longer hide its enormous body. The body of the Hydra that was entrenched on the towering tree was finally completely exposed in front of Han Shuo and Gilbert. At this moment, the 2 long necks of the Hydra were dripping with fresh blood. The other 7 heads shook their heads and waved their tails. The towering tree that it was entrenched in seemed to be unable to withstand the Hydra's painful struggle. After a loud creak, it suddenly broke and collapsed, bringing the Hydra's body down with it. At this moment, a huge ravine suddenly split open on the brown ground. An earth-shaking sound came from the depths of the earth. There seemed to be a terrifying danger waiting for the Hydra to fall. As a rank-surpassing magical beast, the 9-headed Hydra naturally possessed the ability to fly. Its massive body swayed unsteadily due to the pain as it gradually descended. However, when one of the snake heads accidentally saw that the ground below had suddenly split open into a huge ravine, the 9-headed snake was scared out of its wits. It hurriedly and continuously struggled. In the end, its swaying body actually magically stopped in the void and slowly flew into the distance. In the face of the threat of death, the Hydra's struggle with all its might seemed to be effective. However, the attack from the ground wasn't just limited to that. The Hydra had just flown a short distance when it suddenly discovered that several sharp mounds of earth had risen from the ground and were rushing towards its body. In that moment, the Hydra was incomparably vexed. It hadn't expected that its ambush this time would lead to such a situation. According to its original plan, after getting close to Han Shuo and Gilbert, it could use its highly toxic venom to subdue the Dragon Knight, Han Shuo, through the spread of the poisonous smoke, and then take care of the little black dragon that was a rank lower than it. Unfortunately, Han Shuo, who had diligently trained in demonic arts, didn't fall for the attack of the poisonous smoke as it had hoped. The appearance of the Little Skull and the Earth Elite Zombie further boosted Han Shuo's strength and completely destroyed the Hydra's plan. The 9 snake heads suddenly shook, their slender necks swaying continuously. The few mounds that the Earth Elite zombie had created were blocked by the venom that the snake heads had spat out, and the ferocious impact hindered the power of the mounds. During this process, the Hydra's body gradually rose, and as soon as it dodged the Earth Elite zombie's mound attack, it frantically flew towards the pool of water that it had come from. A thick stream of magma flame was abnormally glaring in the pitch-black night sky as it abruptly crashed into one of the snake heads. A ghastly cry rang out, and the Hydra's enormous body stumbled as it fled. Some of the surrounding trees that passed by snapped under the impact of its enormous body. Some of the magical creatures in the surroundings fled in panic, fleeing as far as they could. "Waha, a rank 2 fellow still has to run!" Gilbert's voice rang out in the night sky as his enormous body moved quickly, carrying Han Shu and the little skull on his back as he chased after the Hydra at a moderate pace. The fleeing Hydra destroyed all the towering trees that stood in its way, and just as Gilbert was about to catch up, it suddenly jumped into the pool of water that it had come from. The originally clear water of the pool seemed to have been immediately polluted, quickly turning into a quagmire that smelled like a gutter. When it had escaped from the pool, the water had still been clear, but now that it had changed after entering, it meant that the Hydra could no longer control its power, most likely due to its injuries. As soon as it fell into the quagmire, the Hydra caused a huge commotion, stirring up the surrounding mud and spreading a foul stench in all directions. "Honored Master, leave the rest to me. You can just watch from above. I'm very familiar with this kind of place." Gilbert laughed heartily. When Han Shu had first met Gilbert, he had been hiding in a quagmire, using the advantage of the quagmire to confront the Dark Elves. It was obvious that he was very used to fighting and hiding in this kind of place. Now that the Hydra had been injured, plus Han Shu was watching from above, and Gilbert had an astonishing resistance to poison, Han Shu wasn't worried about his safety. "All right, go down. If you can't hold on any longer, come out or scream." Han Shu nodded, agreeing with Gilbert's actions. With a wild laugh, Dark Dragon Gilbert's enormous body flipped over and fell into the mud with a plop. He was like an enormous loach as he started to sink deeper into the mud. For a moment, the quagmire set off a huge commotion. Gilbert had obviously found the Hydra at the bottom of the quagmire and started fighting. With the quagmire as the center, the earth shook, and the towering trees shook violently. All the magical creatures, big and small, were startled by this huge commotion and fled in panic. It was as if a bomb had been thrown into the center of the quagmire. Huge pillars of mud shot out from the quagmire in all directions with a loud rumble. The quagmire had turned into a terrifying whirlpool, constantly stirring up everything. From time to time, a few of the Hydra's heads or Gilbert's enormous tail would appear above the quagmire. Looking down from above, Han Shu discovered that Gilbert and the Hydra's bodies were entangled together, rolling and grinding in the quagmire. "Arg!" Suddenly, Gilbert's extremely lewd cries came from within the quagmire. Then, something that left Han Shu dumbfounded happened. The entangled Hydra and Gilbert slowly surfaced from the quagmire, their bodies tightly entwined. It didn't look like they were fighting, but more like they were intimate. Gilbert's thick tail and sharp claws were constantly touching the Hydra's body like a human hand. The Hydra, which had been struggling fiercely to escape from the Dark Dragon's entanglement, wrapped its 9 slender necks tighter and tighter around the Dark Dragon. Streaks of black light had unknowingly wrapped around the 2 super-rank magical beasts that were entangled with each other. The bodies of the 2 enormous creatures slowly shrunk, gradually turning into a man and a woman who were entangled with each other. And they were naked humans tightly hugging each other. Chapter 233. Han Shu stood high up in the sky, dumbfounded as he looked at the changes below. For a moment, he was stunned, and his entire person froze. Gilbert and the Hydra had become 2 naked mud men entangled together. The original battle had actually turned into another form of battle. Moreover, the battle was in full swing, and the waves were roaring incessantly. Han Shu was greatly surprised as he watched. The race of black dragons were lascivious, and every Hydra was a female. They were not good birds, and had always been synonymous with obscenity. These two creatures could turn from a battle into a battle. As expected, they were very powerful, and it directly shocked Han Sho. The two mud people were entangled with each other and rolled around in the mud. Because their bodies were covered in mud, it was impossible to see their original appearances. Only the curvaceous body of the Hydra was able to distinguish the characteristics of a woman. The lewd Hydra had big breasts and plump buttocks, and was entangled with the black dragon. They were in the midst of intense copulation, and the sound of intense panting was incessant, resounding in the quiet night sky, stirring one's soul. Han Sho, who was watching excitedly, felt that it was unimaginable. Suddenly, he felt someone tugging at the corner of his clothes. He couldn't help but look back, and saw the little skull with 7 bone spurs flashing. The little skull's purple demon eye shone brightly, and it stretched out a white bone claw to point at the black dragon and Hydra who were engaged in the act below. It asked Han Sho, "What are they doing?" Han Sho, The little skull tugged at the corner of Han Sho's clothes again, and the purple light in its purple demon eye flowed. It seemed to be very confused, as if it couldn't understand what was happening. It sent another message to ask Han Sho. "The black dragon is conquering it. Children shouldn't ask so many questions." Han Sho couldn't argue with it, and so he gave a strange smile. Half of the Earth Elite zombie's body was buried in the ground at some unknown time. He waved his 2 arms wildly, looking at the 2 people in the quagmire in great bewilderment. He seemed to be considering whether or not he should approach and attack. That quagmire was very wide and contained a large amount of poisonous liquid. If the Earth Elite zombie rushed inside, he wouldn't be able to fully utilize his abilities. Adding to that, the current situation was very strange. Han Sho hastily used his consciousness to stop the Earth Elite zombie's movements. Gradually, the 2 people who were originally above the quagmire slowly fell into it, and disappeared from Han Sho's sight. However, the huge movement in the quagmire did not disappear with it. Han Sho knew that this lecherous dragon and lecherous snake's great battle didn't stop when the figure disappeared. It just moved to the bottom of the quagmire. Seeing that he couldn't find anything, Han Sho descended from the sky and landed beside the Earth Elite zombie. He patted the Earth Elite zombie's shoulder and praised, "Well done!" Previously, the Earth Elite zombie hid in the ground and used his manipulation of the power of the Earth to pose a huge threat to the Hydra. That kind of ability to tear the Earth into ravines made Han Sho very excited. This meant that the Earth Elite zombie had spent some time with the little skull and had indeed developed a very good combat awareness. Up until now, the Hydra should be unable to pose any threat to Han Sho. Therefore, after Han Sho landed and praised the Earth Elite zombie, he once again chanted an incantation and sent the little skull and the Earth Elite zombie back to their home. Then, Han Sho flew to a towering tree on the side of the quagmire and sat cross-legged on the trunk. He silently adjusted his breathing while paying attention to the movements in the quagmire. During this process, a huge rumbling sound came from afar, as if a huge monster was passing by nearby. Han Sho, who was silently adjusting his breathing, immediately separated a Yin demon and flew towards the source of the sound to find out what was going on. A green cyclops, 8 to 9 meters tall, with muscles all over his body that were as hard as rock, strode forward with his 2 thick legs that were like towering stone pillars. He was hurrying along at high speed. Every step he took was accompanied by an earthquake, as if a mountain was collapsing. Along the way, all the trees and shrubs were flattened. The ground seemed to have been bulldozed, becoming flat and tidy. Even some of the hard rocks were crushed under his feet. This was enough to prove that this green cyclops had a super strength that could rival a god. The cyclops seemed to be a bit anxious. His footsteps were extremely hurried, causing all the magical beasts in the surroundings to retreat and leave their nests to make a path for him. The huge rumbling sound gradually faded into the distance. Han Sho was astonished. He was shocked by the cyclops that had just left. Such a huge fellow with a body as hard as rock definitely contained terrifying power. Even the Hydra and Gilbert would have a headache if they encountered such a fellow. Just as Han Sho was thinking this, a huge commotion came from within the quagmire. A whirlpool spun in the center of the quagmire as brown mud arrows shot out. It was as if a lewd dragon and a lewd snake had reached a critical juncture. As expected, a huge howl came from within after a while. Then, the smelly quagmire miraculously began to clear up in an extremely short amount of time. The muddy water gradually sank, and with the sound of bubbles, clear water gradually appeared. Gilbert's naked figure broke out of the quagmire. His muscles were black and shiny, and the mud that had covered his body had been washed away. As soon as he broke out of the quagmire, Gilbert laughed heartily, his voice filled with indescribable excitement and pride. He lowered his head to look at the gurgling water below, and couldn't help but laugh lewdly. He seemed extremely arrogant and savage. "Honorable Master, you are a living god in this world. You possess miracles that transcend all common sense. You have allowed your humble servant to possess a supreme skill that will allow him to dominate the Black Dragon City in the future. I will always praise you. Oh, you are so great!" After Gilbert leapt out of the water, he spat out a string of flattery. His tone was sincere, his emotions were passionate, and his words were mushy. This was more than any of his previous flattery. It was obvious that Gilbert was truly excited and ecstatic at this moment. This wasn't just pure flattery. "What, did you use that supreme skill?" Han Sho chuckled oddly as he looked at Gilbert with a smile that wasn't quite a smile. Nodding repeatedly, Gilbert was truly excited. He exclaimed loudly, "Of course, it's just too miraculous. I've taken care of that female snake. She can't even move now. What's the exact situation?" Han Sho started and then asked Gilbert in a low, furtive voice, as if he was afraid that the hydra in the quagmire would hear him. With a low, vulgar chuckle, Gilbert said softly and proudly, "Honorable Master, I've already stolen a bit of her essence in the process. I can feel that my body has received unimaginable benefits. Will this hydra pose a threat to us again?" Han Sho nodded in understanding, then frowned and asked calmly, "Don't worry, I definitely won't. Moreover, I have a way to subdue her. In that case, you will have another powerful helper in the future, Master." Gilbert made a solemn vow. The smile on his face was perhaps obscene. "Well, since you're so confident, I'll believe you this time. I hope you won't let me down." After seeing the magic of the hydra, Han Sho thought about it, and chose to believe Gilbert, nodding and agreeing to his proposal. "Then, let's leave here for a while. She needs a long time to rest now. When she recovers, I'll come back to find her." Gilbert looked at the clear pool reluctantly and said, "All right, I just saw a cyclops rushing in one direction. Let's go and see what's going on." Han Sho thought of the performance of the cyclops, and said to Gilbert thoughtfully, "The cyclops is said to be the servant of the gods. It is said that they have the magical ability to forge weapons and find special ores. They like to eat people, have strong bodies, and have a stubborn personality. Their living habits are somewhat similar to dwarves. Another legend says that the Cyclops is actually a kind of dwarf, but it has an incredibly huge body, including terrible destructive power, and lives in huge buildings. The Cyclops has a rock-hard body. It is not known if it is because of this body, but they have the instinct to find some strange ores. Some rare ores can be found by them. This magical instinct makes all alchemists envious. Just now, the Cyclops was rushing so anxiously, Han Sho naturally thought of his instinctive characteristics. He didn't know if he had found any special metal ores and was rushing to dig them out. Maybe the Cyclops has found a good place or is planning to mine some special ores. Gilbert clearly knew the instinctive characteristics of the Cyclops, and couldn't help but whisper. Nodding, Han Sho said with a smile, "Let's go and see. I happen to need some materials for refining. Let's see if this Cyclops can help me find something good." As soon as the words fell, Han Sho and Gilbert quickly followed the path that the Cyclops had taken. Chapter 234. The enormous Cyclops displayed its powerful physique to its heart's content. Along the way, the earth shook, the mountains shook, ancient trees snapped, and all beasts retreated. Even in the dark forest where danger lurked on every side and super-rank magical creatures frequently roamed, there were still very few creatures who were willing to provoke a creature as powerful as the Cyclops. It wasn't an easy thing to become enemies with such a big fellow. Han Shu and Gilbert followed the tracks the Cyclops had left behind and caught up to him without much effort. In order to avoid attracting his attention, Han Shu rode on Gilbert's dragon body and purposefully kept a large distance from the Cyclops. Following behind the Cyclops, Han Shu paid close attention to his surroundings along the way. He actually discovered a few powerful presences that seemed to be interested in the Cyclops' movements. However, these presences also purposefully avoided the Cyclops and hid far away, unwilling to approach him. They only followed the tracks the Cyclops had left behind, seeming to have the same intentions as Han Shu. When Han Shu sensed these powerful presences, he immediately had Gilbert transform into his human form, and used the art of the demonic ninth heavens to drag Gilbert along. This was to prevent Gilbert's enormous size from attracting the attention of these powerful creatures and becoming their prey. The three demons were placed in the surroundings, constantly on the lookout for danger that could descend at any time. Danger was everywhere in the dark forest, and Han Shu had to be cautious. The Cyclops' towering body covered a distance of 5 to 6 meters with each step. After a period of turbulent travel, they finally entered a small mountain, Tanai. Tanai's waterfall flowed freely, the trees were verdant, the small lake was clear, and the flowers were beautiful. There were a few strange rocks of various colors at the bottom of the clear river. Under the illumination of the sunlight, they shone with gentle light, causing the small river to shimmer with a phosphorescent light and accentuate the colors of the swimming fish. Strangely, when the Cyclops arrived at the valley, his previously reckless footsteps suddenly became cautious. He was very careful with each step, as if afraid of breaking the tranquility of the valley and alarming some powerful creature. Han Shu, who was following the Cyclops from afar, hid in a crack on a cliff above the valley. He focused his gaze on the valley below, paying attention to the Cyclops' movements. The Cyclops arrived at the valley and carefully walked forward with light steps. As he walked, he untied the huge iron shovel on his back and walked straight towards the small lake where the waterfall fell. To Han Shu's surprise, the lake was very deep. When the Cyclops' 10-meter-tall body fell into the lake water actually reached up to his shoulders. No matter how careful the Cyclops was, he still caused the water to ripple violently the moment he fell into the lake. The colorful fish fled in all directions in fright. The clear water around him gradually became murky, clearly affected by his footsteps. When the Cyclops waved his hands and used the iron shovel in his hands to work, the water in the lake became even more turbulent, and the clear surface of the lake became murkier and murkier. Huge rocks were sent out of the lake by the swing of the iron shovel. The Cyclops only needed a glance to distinguish the useful ones from the useless ones. Once the useful rocks were shoveled to the shore, he would immediately put them away and continue his work. The rocks dug out by the Cyclops were all covered in mud and silt. Han Shu couldn't tell what kind of rocks they were, but since the Cyclops had taken a liking to them and made him secretly dig for them from thousands of kilometers away, they shouldn't be easily obtainable. Suddenly, a few powerful auras descended from different directions near the valley. They all locked their attention on the Cyclops, as if waiting for something. In an instant, Han Shu's breathing calmed and his heartbeat slowed. He began to deliberately conceal his movements to avoid being discovered and causing unnecessary trouble. As a super-rank magical beast, Gilbert also had a miraculous method of concealing himself. Under Han Shu's gaze, he slowly dove into the flowing river of the lake and continued to sink until he reached the bottom of the swamp. As an evil race in the underground world, dark dragons had an innate talent for hiding in swamps. When Gilbert dove into the swamp, the flowing river water and mud obstructed his detection. Even Han Shu had to carefully sense his surroundings in order to vaguely find traces of him. After concealing his body, the three demons carefully circled around the mountain valley under Han Shu's control. They slowly closed in on a few directions based on the auras they sensed. First, on the branch of a 7-meter-tall old tree stood an old woman with wrinkles all over her face, wearing a fiery red mage robe. From the magic insignia on her robe, Han Shuo discovered that this old woman was actually a fire grand magus. Her gaze didn't linger on the Cyclops. Instead, she kept looking around, as if she was more interested in the valley itself. The second person was a middle-aged man with a handsome and robust appearance. His short golden hair stood on end, and he seemed to be in high spirits. He stopped behind a rock and focused his attention on the Cyclops. This middle-aged man had a strange aura that was actually somewhat similar to that of Dark Dragon Gilbert. When Han Shuo used this feeling to carefully size up the middle-aged man, he suddenly realized that this middle-aged man should be an adult golden dragon. The third powerful creature landed in the shrubbery. It was a giant ape around 4 meters tall, with long silver fur and a pair of blood-red eyes. The nails at the ends of its slender arms were as sharp as knives, and there were even traces of blood on them, as if it had just torn apart a magical beast. The last person was a beautiful girl on a Pegasus, hovering in the air. Her teeth were white, her eyes were bright, and her skin was fair. Her beautiful and flawless face exuded a holy aura. She sat on the Pegasus, her slender body straight and her chest high and full. Her attention was also focused on the Cyclops. Through the prying eyes of the 3 demons, Han Shuo observed the 4 powerful beings hidden in the valley one by one. He couldn't help but be shocked. The dark forest was indeed a frightening place. A single Cyclops had attracted so many experts. 4 powerful creatures, 2 magical beasts, and 2 humans. The middle-aged man was, of course, the transformation of the super-rank magical beast Golden Dragon. Golden dragons were one of the strongest races of dragons, and their strength was publicly recognized. The middle-aged man's aura was as distant and heavy as a mountain. He was a powerful existence that had evolved at least 3 times, and definitely wasn't something that the little dark dragon who had just made her debut could compare to. The silver-eyed giant ape had a 4-meter-tall body. Just from the sharpness and coldness of its fingertips, Han Shuo could keenly sense that they were stained with the blood of the powerful humans and beasts of the dark forest. The smell of blood permeated the air around it. Although he didn't know what kind of mutated monster it was, the powerful aura was definitely not weak. The wrinkled old woman was a fire grand magus. Her use of fire magic had already reached the pinnacle, and her strength was absolutely shocking and terrifying. Only the beautiful girl on the Pegasus was left. Han Shuo couldn't judge her strength from her appearance, but the fact that she dared to appear here made Han Shuo believe that she wasn't an easy opponent to deal with. If it wasn't for her extreme confidence in her own strength, she definitely wouldn't have appeared in this place. When Han Shuo observed the 4 powerful creatures hiding in the dark through the Yin demons, he immediately communicated with Gilbert and told him to stop moving, in case he suffered an unexpected calamity. Roar! A loud roar suddenly rang out from the depths of the earth. The entire mountain valley shook, and the rocks on the cliffs shook and fell towards the small lake and river. This roar came from the depths of the earth and revealed boundless rage. The 4 powerful creatures watching in the dark all had different expressions when they heard this loud roar. The golden dragon and the beautiful girl on the Pegasus were both startled and seemed to be caught off guard. They didn't know what had happened, and their gazes moved away from the Cyclops to look towards the lake and river. The fire grand magus and the giant silver ape seemed to understand what had happened, and their expressions were filled with unconcealable excitement. After a loud roar, the temperature of the small valley, which was originally at a comfortable temperature, soared. The small lake and the cool river water suddenly became like a hot spring. Steam rose from them and gradually spread throughout the valley. The Cyclops obviously also knew what had happened. His originally gentle movements immediately sped up, as if he was hiding from something. He wanted to obtain more of the strange ores in the lake in the shortest amount of time possible, and frantically increased his pace of work. Following the loud rumbling sounds, Tanai's earth trembled and the lake and river seemed to split open from the ground. The temperature in the mountain valley rose steadily, and a few tender flowers were the first to wither, unable to withstand the heat. Afterwards, some shrubs and leaves dried up and cracked, gradually emitting thick smoke. Gilbert, who was hiding in the depths of the mud, suddenly felt the temperature of the water skyrocket. Even his strong body couldn't withstand it, and he almost turned into a roasted dragon. He couldn't help but want to leave the mud and escape. However, Han Sho discovered that the 4 powerful creatures hidden in the surroundings had all raised their attention to the maximum. A thick killing intent permeated the valley, as if a great battle was about to begin at any moment. Han Sho was greatly alarmed and hurriedly tried to stop the dark dragon with all his might, dispelling any thoughts of leaving the bottom of the river, lest he become the first target. When Han Sho strongly tried to stop the dark dragon, he gave him the order to make use of the mud to leave the mountain valley first. This was to prevent him from becoming the target of everyone's attacks and ending up with a miserable death. Gilbert forcefully endured the danger of his body being burned and used his innate ability, as a dark dragon, to quickly move towards a place where the temperature was lower. He gradually left the area of the mountain valley and disappeared along the direction of the river. Not long after the dark dragon's body left, a terrifying roar sounded from the depths of the earth. It was as if the river and lake had been torn apart as underground fire erupted from the mountain valley. Magma bubbled out of the lake and river, the scorching heat making anyone feel extremely uncomfortable. In the middle of the river where the magma had gathered, a dozen or so fiery red stone giants that seemed to be made of magma slowly bent their bodies and stood up. These stone giants were as red as branding iron, and there seemed to be magma constantly churning within their bodies. Each of them was as tall as the giant silver ape, and magma flowed from their eyes, making them appear extremely terrifying and sinister. As the rolling magma spread, they charged towards the Cyclops. "It's the Flame Demon Battle General! It's here indeed!" The Fire Grand Magus couldn't help but exclaim in surprise and excitement. The giant silver ape had a sinister appearance, and a fierce light flickered in its blood-red eyes. At this moment, it was anxiously waving its 2 thick arms, as if planning to rush forward and fight, but also hesitating and waiting for something. The Golden Dragon and the Pegasus Girl seemed to only be targeting the Cyclops and obviously hadn't encountered such a situation. They stood there in a daze for a moment, rapidly thinking about something. Just as the 4 experts lurking in the dark were contemplating what to do, the Flame Demon Generals made of lava stood up straight from the river and charged at the Cyclops. At this moment, the Cyclops didn't dare to stay here any longer. It picked up its shovel and once again took heavy steps, planning to leave the mountain valley as soon as possible and avoid the attacks of the Flame Demon Battle Generals. Sensing the rising temperature of the Tanai, the surrounding ground rapidly cracked and all the plants and flowers withered in an extremely short amount of time. The scorching heat from the depths of the earth made Han Sho feel extremely uncomfortable. However, at this moment, Han Sho instead closed his eyes and relaxed his body, as if he wanted to feel everything around him more clearly. After a while, Han Sho opened his eyes. His eyes sparkled as he gazed at the mountain valley that had turned into a sea of fire. He murmured, "Yes, yes, the place of extreme fire should be down there." Chapter 235. Roar! Another terrifying roar came from the depths of the earth. The valley shook violently under the roar, and large pieces of rocks rolled down from the cliffs. The boulders that formed the waterfall creaked as if they would collapse at any time. An extremely powerful aura leaked out from the depths of the cracked ground. The impact of the powerful sound waves caused the withered trees to collapse and the ground to rapidly crack, forming huge ravines. Han Sho's 3 demons didn't spread out to observe the surroundings at this time. They immediately retracted to his side and surveyed the surroundings. Their bodies had been stuck close to the rocks, but because of the scorching heat, the rocks were already as red as branding iron. Han Sho had no choice but to temporarily take to the air. Accompanied by the impact of the terrifying sound waves, the flame demon generals that walked out of the lava attacked the Cyclops without any hesitation. Streams of lava intertwined with each other as they flew out from the river of lava under the control of the flame demon generals, shooting towards the Cyclops' enormous body. 3 4-meter-tall flame demon generals walked out from the depths of the ground and blocked the Cyclops' path of retreat. They charged towards the Cyclops with blazing flames all over their bodies. The Cyclops' enormous body was twice the size of the flame demon generals. His green muscles were as hard as granite, and the huge iron shovel he held in his hands became his weapon of defense. Every swing of the shovel carried a violent force, bringing a violent gust of hot wind to the valley. Crackling sounds could be heard coming from the Cyclops' side. Every time he waved his shovel, a stream of lava would be slashed to the side. Blazing sparks flew everywhere, as the red rocks wrapped in lava shattered and shot in all directions. Some of the withered trees and flowers in the surroundings were immediately set ablaze when they came into contact with the flaming rocks. The raging flames quickly spread and enveloped the entire valley in a sea of fire. A fiery red rock the size of a head was swung by the Cyclops, carrying a high temperature and emitting thick flames. It shattered from the lava and shot towards Han Sho. The raging flames carried a violent force, forcing Han Sho to retreat in a sorry state. With a rumble, the fiery rock the size of a head smashed into the hard rock that Han Sho had been standing on. Brilliant sparks flew everywhere, as the blazing flames burned on the rock. It was so wondrous that one couldn't help but gasp in amazement. Fire-spark stone was an excellent material for forging weapons. Han Sho stared at the burning rock with bright eyes. He immediately recognized the wondrous rock from the blazing flames surrounding it. It was the fire-spark stone, a material that cultivators greatly needed for forging weapons. He extended his left hand, and a ball of purple demonic fire rose from his palm like a ghost. It shrouded the fire-spark stone with a bone-chilling aura. When the blazing heat and the bone-chilling aura came into contact, thick white smoke immediately rose, accompanied by a sizzling sound. Feeling the effects of the mystical glacial spell fire, Han Sho immediately circulated his magical yuan. The ball of purple flames that covered the fire-spark stone jumped even more alluringly. Clouds of dense white mist rose from the fire-spark stone. Under the assault of the bone-chilling aura, the blazing fire-spark stone slowly extinguished and returned to calmness. Finally, it became an ordinary fiery red rock, sparkling with a resplendent red light like a ruby. When he saw that the flames on the fire-spark stone had been extinguished, Han Sho's face lit up with joy. He immediately put the head-sized fire-spark stone into his space ring, in case he needed to use it when he wanted to refine weapons in the future. No matter if it was a martial practitioner or a demonic practitioner, as long as they forged weapons, they couldn't do without some special flames. After all, some special materials could only be melted through high temperatures. This kind of fire-spark stone was very miraculous. If it didn't come into contact with flames, it would be as ordinary as an ordinary rock, without the slightest bit of heat. However, as soon as the fire-spark stone came into contact with the slightest spark, it would immediately burst into flames. Only when all the energy within the fire-spark stone had been burned away would it become the most ordinary rock. During this process, the fire-spark stone's enormous flame energy could melt all the materials for the cultivator, making it convenient for the next step of forging weapons. Han Sho was overjoyed when he collected the fire-spark stone. His eyes sparkled as he began to search for more fire-spark stones amidst the sparks in the sky. Then, a fiery dragon streaked across the sky and landed around the beautiful girl on the Pegasus. At the end of the fiery dragon's path was an even larger fire-spark stone burning fiercely, instantly enveloping the entire area in a sea of flames. At this moment, the 4 powerhouses that had been hiding in the valley were all on high alert. Due to the chaos in the valley, traces of some people had been exposed. These powerhouses had all discovered each other's traces, but none of them made a move. To be able to appear in this valley without fear in the face of such a terrifying scene, they were either brainless or fearless powerhouses. Every powerful creature understood that before the situation was clear, they couldn't act rashly. Thus, even though they knew that there were other powerhouses hiding in the surroundings of the valley, they didn't dare act rashly. That larger fire-spark stone started burning fiercely. Waves of heat surged out, causing the Pegasus girl to sweat profusely. The fire's parkstone that had been burning fiercely started to extinguish piece by piece amidst the sizzling sounds. The spirited Pegasus beneath the beautiful girl wasn't used to the high temperature of the mountain valley, and kept swaying restlessly. It was only because the girl repeatedly suppressed it that it didn't immediately leave the mountain valley. However, when Han Shuo used the purple flames, the surrounding temperature abruptly dropped with Han Shuo at the center. It was like a paradise in the scorching heat, creating a strong temptation for the spirited Pegasus beneath the girl. Without the girl's orders, the Pegasus approached Han Shuo of its own accord and flew greedily around Han Shuo, as if it was extremely reluctant to leave this place with such a suitable temperature. Han Shuo, who was focused on collecting the fire's parkstone, saw the Pegasus and the girl's actions clearly through the Yin demon's observation. During this process, the beautiful girl tried to stop the Pegasus from approaching, but obviously didn't succeed. Raising his head, Han Shuo looked at the beautiful girl again and revealed a kind smile, indicating that he understood that she didn't approach him on her own accord and that she didn't have any ill intentions. "Thank you." The girl smiled sweetly like 100 flowers blooming, her voice soft, and her tone sincere. "You're welcome." Han Shuo lowered his head and continued activating his demonic arts, planning to extinguish the fire's parkstone as quickly as possible. He didn't take another look at the beautiful girl. With the existence of the 3 Yin demons, even if Han Shuo was immersed in his work, he could still see Tanai's situation with a single glance. A few flame demon generals blocked the Cyclops' path and fought with the enormous Cyclops, attempting to keep the Cyclops in the mountain valley forever. However, the Cyclops, who was twice the size of the flame demon generals, also had an extremely tough body. He fiercely swung the huge iron shovel in his hand, chopping 2 flame demon generals into a few large pieces of rock that melted into the river with astonishing momentum. However, some of the scorching hot lava landed on the Cyclops' azure body, causing a large area to be charred black. The Cyclops also groaned in pain. One of its eyes was filled with anxiety as it looked towards the depths of the river from time to time, as if it was afraid that some powerful creature would suddenly break through the ground and walk out. The Fire Grand Magus was completely enveloped in a red magic shield. The old woman within the magic shield had an excited expression as her old eyes shone with light. Her attention was focused on the depths of the lava, as if she was waiting for something. The robust golden dragon was drenched from head to toe in the high temperature of Mountain Tanai. He slowly moved towards the outside of the mountain valley, as if he was preparing to take the opportunity to attack the Cyclops. The giant silver ape's shiny silver fur stood up like steel needles. A few sparks landed on its silver fur, but there wasn't a single trace of being charred. Its 2 steel claws clenched and relaxed repeatedly, and its blood-red eyes focused on the depths of the river of lava, but it didn't dare to approach. Roar! Another loud roar rang out, and the mountain valley really started to collapse. The earth was also torn apart. The underground creature was truly enraged now, as if blaming the flame demon generals for their incompetence. Fissures appeared in the ground, and even more lava burst out, shooting in all directions like a fountain. In an extremely short period of time, the beautiful scenery of the entire mountain valley no longer existed. An enormous creature over 10 meters tall stood up from the largest crack in the ground, along with the rolling lava. This enormous creature had a pointed head and a round lower body. Its entire body was red like hot iron, just like the flame demon generals. It was like a moving, burning volcano, and an enormous aura emanated from its body. The sky seemed to be set ablaze, and large patches of fiery clouds covered the sky above the mountain valley, causing the sky and earth to become one color, becoming a kingdom of flames. The heavens fell and the earth cracked, and the rocks of the mountain valley came crashing down. After this enormous creature walked out from the depths of the earth, its enormous body swayed backwards, causing even more lava to shoot out in all directions. It was truly a volcanic eruption. It's actually the Lord of the Flames. No wonder the flame demon generals have appeared. The beautiful girl beside Han Shuo cried out in surprise. She got off her Pegasus and shouted softly, "Leave this place, quickly!" The Pegasus that was infatuated with the temperature around Han Shuo was clearly very happy when it heard the girl's order. It flew up gracefully, planning to leave this place of trouble. However, the terrifying Lord of the Flames and its raging flames burned the earth. The fiery clouds in the sky weren't fake. They were actually under its control, and they completely covered the sky above the mountain valley. When the girl and the Pegasus took off, the fiery clouds ignited with intense flames, turning the sky into a sea of fire. No one would be able to escape from the sky. Furious killing intent spread from the Lord of the Flames to the surroundings. Every expert realized that this flame controller was indeed cruel to the guests who trespassed into its kingdom. Chapter 236. The Fire's Park Stone had finally been collected by Han Shuo. However, the entire mountain valley had been sealed off by fire. The 6 powerful beings, including Han Shuo, were all trapped within the mountain valley. In such an area where volcanoes erupted and lava sprayed everywhere, the 6 powerful beings with ulterior motives would all face the wrath of the Lord of the Flames. No one would be able to escape unscathed. After the Fire's Park Stone entered the space ring, the purple flames in Han Shuo's palms extinguished, and the surrounding temperature once again skyrocketed. The sweat on Han Shuo's body converged like a small river and flowed downwards. The beautiful girl and the Pegasus had no choice but to descend to the ground in the face of the fiery clouds. They looked up at the fiery clouds and sighed helplessly. It looked like they didn't dare to rashly charge into the air above the burning mountain valley. The Fire Grand Magus in the distance floated between Han Shuo and the girl like the wind with a bright red magic shield. She smiled faintly. The 3 of us are all humans, so I think it'll be easier for us to communicate. It'll be easier for us to survive if we're united against a common enemy. What do you think? In the face of such terrifying danger, joining forces with the strong was indeed a good choice. Apart from the Lord of the Flames, Taunai also had the giant silver ape, the Cyclops, and the golden dragon. These 3 powerful beings were equally strong, but it was a pity that they weren't humans and weren't good partners to work with. Of course, only by working together will we be able to walk out of this fiery kingdom alive. Han Shuo naturally knew that he didn't have the confidence to deal with any of the Taunai experts by himself. This Fire Grand Magus seemed to know what would happen. Although he didn't know what she was planning, he could at least wait and see. That's a good idea, Granny! The beautiful girl revealed a radiant smile and spoke in a clear and melodious voice. The Fire Grand Magus seemed to have long since known that Han Shuo and the beautiful girl would agree. She lightly waved the magic staff in her left hand and chanted a profound incantation. With Han Shuo's group of 3 as the center, a house-sized barrier was instantly formed. This barrier was invisible and formless, but it isolated the high temperature. The surrounding lava that was erupting was blocked outside. After the old lady created the barrier, the magic shield on her body disappeared. She smiled at Han Shuo and the girl, and introduced herself. I'm Marceau from the Brute Merchant Alliance. I major in fire magic. Brian Han, from Lancelot Empire, a necromancer. Han Shuo replied. Sophie, I come from the Kasi Empire. I am a knight. He can be considered half an incompetent summoner. The beautiful Pegasus girl replied simply. As soon as she finished speaking, she softly chanted a spell, and the Pegasus she had been riding magically disappeared without a trace. The old lady Marceau and the girl called Sophie seemed to have heard of each other's names. When the 2 of them introduced themselves, the other revealed a surprised expression. Only Han Shuo was unknown. Marceau and Sophie clearly hadn't heard of Han Shuo before, and both looked at Han Shuo with some confusion. Anyone who could fly in the air and appear here was definitely not a nameless person. As a powerful practitioner of necromancy magic, if there was such a person in the Lancelot Empire, they would definitely have heard of him. Therefore, when Marceau and Sophie realized that they hadn't heard of Han Shuo's name, they thought that Han Shuo had given them a fake name. Faced with the 2's confusion, Han Shuo shrugged his shoulders and explained with a wry smile. I'm telling the truth. I've only just started my career, so it's normal that I'm not well known. There's nothing strange about it. Roar! The Lord of the Flames' enormous roar reverberated throughout the valley. Accompanied by terrifying sound waves, the Lord of the Flames moved its enormous body and chased after the Cyclops. Streaks of scorching flames danced wildly like ribbons, and the violent heat caused the air to crackle. The flames mixed with magma entangled the Cyclops under the Lord of the Flames' control, causing the Cyclops to dodge in all directions. It was obvious that it was no match for the Lord of the Flames. The Golden Dragon's target should have been the Cyclops, but at this moment, he realized that he was also facing great danger. He seemed to have given up on the idea of immediately dealing with the Cyclops. He stood at the entrance of the Valley of Fire, as if pondering how to leave. The giant silver ape pounded its chest and roared loudly. Its body, which had been standing still all this time, suddenly moved. Like a bolt of silver lightning, it tore through the air and shot towards the Lord of the Flames, who was chasing after the Cyclops. In the air, it intertwined its two sharp claws in front of its chest and danced. A few cold glints that looked like swords shot out from its claws. The few flame demon generals in the surroundings were swept by the streaks of cold light, and their bodies suddenly cracked with loud crackling sounds as they quickly melted into the magma. Han Shaw couldn't help but pale with fright when he saw this scene through the Yin demons. He didn't know what kind of mutated magical beast this giant silver ape was, but it had such terrifying destructive power. The two iron claws were actually able to shoot out sword-light attacks, as if they possessed the great power to tear through everything. Before the flame demon general, who was as tall and had a body as hot as iron, could even get close to it, it was already smashed into pieces by the iron claws. The giant silver ape's strength is very terrifying. I've seen it tear apart 3 twin-headed dragons at once. It should be a mutated super-rank magical beast. Its target is the Lord of the Flames. I've observed it for a while, and discovered that it's come to the valley 3 times. Each time, it didn't dare to provoke the Lord of the Flames. This time, it might really be going against it. Old Hag Marceau had actually been paying attention to the commotion in the distance, as she suddenly spoke. Han Shaw stared blankly for a moment, then realized that Marceau hadn't come by chance like him. She must have observed for a long time before choosing to participate in the chaos. He didn't know what she was planning. Roar! An explosive roar erupted from where the golden dragon was. Amidst the dazzling golden light, a giant golden dragon that was 15 to 16 meters long suddenly revealed itself. After the golden dragon transformed, its slender body shook, and a terrifying dragon's breath exploded in front of it. The red rocks that sealed the valley suddenly exploded, and a 5 to 6 meter wide passageway appeared in the valley that had been blocked by the Lord of the Flames. The golden dragon was one of the dragons with the most shocking battle prowess, and its physical body possessed the strongest offensive and defensive abilities. After transforming, the golden dragon was even more ferocious and wild, and had always been synonymous with strength and power. Even the valley that had been sealed by the Lord of the Flames' flint was forcefully blasted open by its fierce dragon's breath. This Lord of the Flames is a super-rank magical beast that has evolved 4 times, while this golden dragon has only evolved 3 times. It's a wise decision for it to give up on seeking revenge against the Cyclops and leave the valley for now. Fire Grand Magus Marceau calmly explained to Han Shu and Sophie as she watched the commotion in the distance. Roar! The Lord of the Flames let out an earth-shattering howl. It naturally thought that the golden dragon's breath was a provocation, and let out a loud howl to vent the anger in its heart. In that moment, the flowing lava and the flaming clouds in the sky seemed to be under the Lord of the Flames' control as they all gathered towards the passageway that the golden dragon had blasted open. Before the golden dragon could leave the valley, the passageway that had just been blasted open was once again blocked by lava, flames, and flaming clouds. This time, the passageway was even tighter than last time. The golden dragon was completely enraged in that moment. As one of the most prideful of super-rank magical beasts, the golden dragon had already given the Lord of the Flames a lot of face by attempting to leave the valley. He hadn't thought that this rank 4 Lord of the Flames would actually want to burn everything with flames. This was intolerable to the golden dragon. A frightening dragon's roar rang out from the golden dragon's enormous mouth. The golden dragon had originally planned on leaving the valley, but temporarily gave up on his original goal. He didn't pay attention to the Cyclops, and actually charged towards the Lord of the Flames. The golden dragon swung his tail wildly as he flew, but the flaming rocks were unable to leave even the slightest mark on his golden body. At the same time, Fire Grand Magus Marceau suddenly cheered in joy and said excitedly, "Chance! Our chance has finally come!" Turning his head to glance at Marceau, Hans Shaw said calmly, "I think you should tell us your plan and intentions now. Otherwise, the two of us wouldn't be following you in a daze. The underground world of the Lord of the Flames is an extremely mystical existence. It's because of this mystical existence that the Lord of the Flames was able to evolve 4 times. I've researched fire magic for many years and discovered that there's a strange fire attribute energy in that place. This energy is completely different from the fire element, and is even more mysterious. That mystical place not only created a grade 4 Lord of the Flames, but also nurtured a mysterious fire lotus and many strange rocks. I only discovered it by chance. Since the Lord of the Flames is fighting outside, I can use my control over fire magic to bring you two into that underground world and take the opportunity to take away some of the mystical things inside. What do you think?" Marceau looked extremely anxious as she quickly explained to the two. "All right," Hans Shaw answered crisply without the slightest hesitation. This fire archmage named Marceau was definitely a powerful person. She was actually able to discover this place of extreme fire and understand that there was an element of fire that was different from the fire element within. It looked like she'd put in a lot of effort into this place of extreme fire. Although fire elemental energy and fire element were both existences of the fire attribute, they were two completely different types of energy. Any mage in this world, as long as they had mental strength, could communicate with fire elemental energy and cast fire magic anywhere. As a magical element, the fire element existed in every corner of this world. A fire mage could use their connection with the fire element to release fire magic of varying power depending on the strength of their mental strength. However, the element of fire didn't exist in every place. It only existed in some naturally mystical places between the heavens and the earth. Only a place that coincided with the trajectory of the heavens and the earth would form a natural treasure ground. Only after thousands of years of evolution would it be possible to form the element of fire in some fiery places. Among them, the place of extreme fire was undoubtedly the best place to nurture the element of fire. Chapter 237. The temperature within the boundary stopped at around 40 degrees. The magma in the cracks in the ground was blocked outside by the boundary, and didn't affect Hans Shaw and the other two inside. Marceau was obviously very strained during this process. The boundary was filled with a large amount of magical elements, which meant that she had expended a lot of mental strength to control the movement of the boundary. After the entire boundary had shrunk to 3 to 4 meters, it became a bit crowded. In addition, the temperature inside was at 40 degrees. Although it didn't burn everything like the outside, it still made people feel wet and uncomfortable. However, Han Shu's body could easily handle this level of temperature. Even if he didn't activate his magical yuan to resist it, Han Shu didn't lie down with his body drenched in sweat. Instead, he used this rare free time to sit down and meditate to recover the magical yuan he had just expended. The beautiful female knight, Sophie, was wearing tight clothes that stuck to her beautiful body. Her clothes were drenched in sweat, as if she had just finished bathing and walked out of the bath, accentuating the curves of her body. Due to the high temperature, fragrant sweat flowed all over her body, and her breathing was uneven. She kept waving her hands to fan herself, as if she wanted to cool herself. Fire Grand Magus Marceau was completely focused on controlling the boundary. She was as focused as Han Shu. The wrinkles on her face were like ravines, and they were also filled with sweat. They couldn't help but slowly flow down her body due to the influence of gravity. The two Yin demons were placed in the valley and observed everything that happened outside, so that Han Shuo could understand the situation above at any time and make accurate decisions. After falling into the cracks in the magma, the boundaries sunk all the way down. The surrounding flames burned fiercely, and some of the magma exploded in all directions with a loud rumble that shook the earth and mountains. When the magma hit the surface of the boundary, beautiful sparks appeared, presenting a beautiful scene of a sea of fire. Unfortunately, of the three people in the boundary, Han Shu and Marceau were too focused to pay attention to the scenery around them. Female Knight Sophie was wet all over and uncomfortable, and there was also a ball of anxious flames burning in her heart. Naturally, she didn't have the mind to pay attention to the beautiful scenery around her. Amidst the blazing and gorgeous sparks, the three of them gradually sank along with the barrier. Among them, Fire Grand Magus Marceau controlled the boundary to shift its direction and slowly descend into the depths of the Earth's core. She seemed to be familiar with the situation here. Finally, the moving boundary suddenly came to a halt. Han Shuo instantly opened his eyes and sized up the scenery around him with glistening eyes. In the shortest amount of time possible, he imprinted the scenery around him into his mind. The first thing that came into view was a wide lake of fire. It was like a burning sun, emitting blazing light and heat. The surging magma was in the form of a fire dragon pillar, rising up from the fire lake one after another. It was probably because of the Flame Lord's power that it was so ferocious. Around the wide lake of fire, there were stone walls that radiated fiery light. These stone walls were as red as soldering iron, emitting a scorching heat. The glaring red light filled the surroundings, causing this area to become a huge space of flames. In the middle of the fire lake, a strange fire lotus blossomed mysteriously in the boiling magma of the fire lake. It flickered with a bewitching red light and swayed along with the rolling fire lake. This posture seemed to possess a soul-stirring beauty. Han Shuo and the other two were still enveloped by the boundary. They floated at the entrance of a cave in the surrounding stone walls, no longer suffering from the damage of the magma and flames. Fire spark stone, fire sun crystal, red agate! Han Shuo exclaimed in surprise. He discovered that there were a few magical stones scattered not far from the entrance of the cave. They were all treasures for refining fire-attributed weapons. These stones were of excellent quality and could be completely smelted into high-quality fire-attributed flying swords, or directly absorbed by fire-attributed practitioners to improve their skills. This area is very mysterious. It contains a strange fire power, and the surrounding stones are very precious. If you embed them in a magic staff, it will definitely have a great effect on a fire-attributed mage, Grand Magus Marceau said while dripping hot sweat. She didn't need to explain much. As a demonic cultivator, Han Shuo could recognize many strange stones based on Chu Kanglin's memories. He understood that these strange stones had different uses, and each one could play a great role. Open the boundary, I'm going to leave and collect some. Han Shuo was overjoyed as he spoke with a calm expression. Marceau was stunned. She hesitated for a moment before kindly reminding him. The temperature outside the barrier is several times higher than inside. I think that once you leave the barrier, you will be cooked by the high temperature. I advise you not to take the risk. No problem, I think I can withstand it. Han Shuo activated his magical yuan, and a pulsating ball of purple flames formed in his left palm. A gust of cold air instantly blew through the 40-degree hot boundary. Sophie and Marceau, who were sweating profusely, couldn't help but shiver. The flowing sweat suddenly stopped, giving them an icy chill. What magic is this? Fire Grand Magus Marceau couldn't help but cry out involuntarily when she saw a ball of purple flames appear in Han Shuo's palm. The high temperature within the boundary was immediately dispelled, and the extremely hot area almost turned into an ice cave. Hee, it's just a strange martial technique. Don't worry, I think I can withstand the high temperature outside. Han Shuo smiled slightly as he held the pulsating ball of purple flames and looked confidently at Marceau. I think you're right. Marceau nodded and then said, "Pay attention, when I count to 3, I'll send you out of the boundary. Prepare yourself." Taking a deep breath, Han Sho activated his magical yuan. His fingers began to move nimbly, and balls of purple flames flashed from his fingertips. When Marceau counted to 3, the boundary where Han Sho was at seemed to have been sliced open by a knife, and the space between the two of them was directly removed. In an instant, the high temperature hit them head-on. The scorching wave of fire broke through the boundary's obstruction and instantly enveloped Han Sho's entire body. Without Marceau's control, the boundary that blocked the high temperature shattered like an eggshell. Not only did it lose the ability to block the heat wave, but it also lost the ability to remain in the air. The rock where Han Sho's foot landed was scorching red. As long as his foot landed, the sole of Han Sho's foot would be charred black in an instant. When he activated his magical yuan to cast the mystical glacial spell fire, he naturally didn't forget to cast the Arc of the demonic Ninth Heavens. Just as Han Sho's foot was about to land on the flint, he suddenly stopped in midair and didn't move. The Yin demon that had accompanied Han Sho in the boundary was immediately placed behind him, constantly paying attention to Marceau and Sophie's movements. Han Sho himself didn't waste a single moment. He used the extreme cold of the mystical glacial spell fire to emit thick white smoke from his body and began to carry out some secret plans. After Han Sho landed, Sophie and Marceau looked at Han Sho's actions in amazement. They were obviously very surprised by Han Sho's actions. However, when the extreme cold on Han Sho's body met the high temperature, his body was immediately covered in thick white smoke. The two women could no longer see Han Sho's figure clearly. The most mystical thing in this area should be the fire lotus in the center of the fire lake. He's gone to collect rocks to forge weapons, so let's go pluck that fire lotus. Fire Grand Magus Marceau didn't seem to care about the unknown rocks in the surroundings, or perhaps it was because she didn't know what magical effects those rocks had. She only focused her attention on the fire lotus. This fire lotus had 10 or so red, translucent leaves the size of palm leaf fans. They were as clear as jade, and there was a strange red light circulating within the veins of each leaf, as if they were nurturing a life of fire. This fire lotus was very eye-catching in the middle of the blazing fire lake, giving off a stunning beauty. Fire Grand Magus Marceau and Sophie seemed to be completely attracted by the strange lotus. The two stared at the fire lotus with fascination, activating the magic boundary and slowly approaching the fire lotus together. Within the thick white smoke, Han Sho didn't activate his magic to collect the fire spirit stones. Instead, he quickly dug a large hole and dripped his own blood essence into it. His eyes shone with a divine light as he looked at the fire lotus from time to time. His expression was incomparably calm, as if he was rapidly thinking about what to set up. Han Sho had heard Marceau's description before coming down and understood that a fire lotus had been nurtured in the place of extreme fire, so he already had his own plans. No matter what, this fire lotus couldn't be obtained by Marceau and Sophie. As a treasure nurtured in the place of extreme fire, the fire lotus had the miraculous effect of directly wrapping around zombies and turning them into a fire elite zombie. Depending on how long the place of extreme fire had been formed, as well as some special opportunities, treasures of the 5 elements could be nurtured. The places of extreme earth, extreme wood, and the Valley of Sunshine's extreme water that Han Sho had discovered hadn't produced any treasures, perhaps because they'd been formed for too long, or perhaps because there hadn't been any suitable opportunities. However, this place of extreme fire might have already existed for tens of thousands of years. After accumulating all sorts of energy over the years, in addition to the existence of the Lord of the Flames, it had actually successfully nurtured the fire lotus. As a treasure of the place of extreme fire, the fire lotus had grown for tens of thousands of years and absorbed all sorts of fire elemental energy, becoming a wondrous treasure. With the existence of the fire lotus, Han Sho didn't need to waste a huge amount of time to gather all sorts of materials. He could directly use a secret technique to form a large formation in the place of extreme fire, then use his blood essence to activate the formation and throw a zombie into the fire lotus. Based on the nutrients that the fire lotus had absorbed over tens of thousands of years and the dense fire elemental energy in the place of extreme fire, it would directly help an ordinary zombie evolve into a fire elite zombie. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Han Sho absolutely wouldn't allow Marceau to take the fire lotus. After he left the boundary, he had already started to set everything up. As Marceau controlled the boundary and slowly approached the fire lotus, Han Sho turned into a thick cloud of white mist and shuttled through the caves around the fiery red rock walls. In the eyes of Marceau and Han Sho was taking the opportunity to collect some strange ores in the surroundings. What they didn't know was that under the cover of the thick smoke, Han Sho had already quickly and successfully excavated the formation I needed to refine the fire elite zombie. Although there was the fire lotus, there weren't any other materials to refine the fire elite zombie. Han Sho's blood essence had completely replaced the practice between the formation eyes. Fortunately, Han Sho had swallowed a 300-year-old blood essence grass and converted enough blood essence. Otherwise, he definitely wouldn't have been able to successfully use the large formation this time. After Han Sho walked around the surrounding rock walls and successfully excavated the formation eye, he immediately chanted an incantation and summoned a little skull from a distant plane. "Hurry up and bring a zombie that you approve of. He'll receive the same treatment as the Earth Elite zombie." Han Sho passed on an order. Without waiting for the little skull to nod in understanding, he sent the little skull back to a distant plane. Then, purple flames danced between Han Sho's hands as he activated his magical yuan. In the direction where the little skull had been standing, the purple flames danced in Han Sho's hands, creating a suitable temperature for that area. The little skull's body was purely made of sparkling white bones. After many times of forging and tempering, Han Sho had sufficient confidence in the little skull's body's toughness. He knew that this level of high temperature wouldn't affect him at all. However, if an ordinary zombie suddenly appeared in such a place, it would definitely be burned to a painful state by the high temperature. It was hard to say whether it would be directly burned to death. Therefore, in order to successfully refine the fire elite zombie, Han Sho had no choice but to make preparations in advance, lest he be roasted to death by the high temperature once he fell into this space. An urgent call came through the little skull from an infinitely distant plane. When Han Sho received this call, he immediately chanted an incantation. Then, in the area of suitable temperature created by magical yuan, the little skull appeared in front of Han Sho with an incomparably large zombie warrior in his hand. Perhaps the little skull sensed Han Sho's anxiousness, but he didn't have time to search in his haste and casually grabbed a zombie warrior with an unusually large head. "All right, it's you!" Time was of the essence. Han Sho had already set up everything. Seeing that Marceau and the little skull were already close to the fire lotus, he didn't have time to be picky. He grabbed the big-headed zombie and rushed towards the central fire lake. Chapter 238. The closer they got to the fire lake, the hotter the temperature became. Afraid that the big-headed zombie wouldn't be able to withstand the heat, Han Sho had no choice but to use his magical yuan to activate the mystical glacial spell fire to lower the temperature around them. Zombie warriors that were used to darkness had an instinctive aversion to sunlight and blazing heat. This big-headed zombie was no exception. Its body couldn't help but sway in Han Sho's hands, as if it was afraid of the burning fire lake. However, with Han Sho's steel-like grip, it couldn't move at all. Two large clouds of white smoke rapidly approached from the surrounding rock walls, arriving next to Fire Grand Magus Marceau in the blink of an eye. At this time, Marceau and Han Sho were only 3 meters away from the fire lotus below. As they were worried that the temperature of the fire lake would be too high for the barrier to withstand, the two didn't dare to approach the fire lotus too quickly. They were afraid that the barrier would shatter from the scorching heat. Why are you here?" Marceau was shocked when Han Sho approached in the form of 2 clouds of smoke. Although she couldn't see Han Sho's appearance due to the thick smoke, she recognized Han Sho from Han Sho's actions just now. "I can't withstand the heat anymore," Please let me enter the barrier to rest. Han Shuo's hurried pleading came from the thick smoke. Han Shuo had already stopped next to the barrier when his voice was heard. Marceau seemed to be in a bit of a dilemma when she heard this. It seemed that it was very difficult for her to bring Han Shuo into the barrier at the moment. She stood there in a daze, hesitating for a moment. Suddenly, Han Shuo's exhausted cry of surprise sounded from the thick cloud of smoke next to Marceau. The thick smoke suddenly sank down and fell into the beautiful fire lotuses that were blooming below. Shrill screams suddenly came from the thick smoke below, causing one's heart to tremble. This caused the two girls, who were confused by the sudden change, to be unable to react for a moment. However, Han Shuo, who was covered by the thick smoke, had a calm expression on his face even though he was screaming in agony. He grabbed the struggling big-headed zombie warrior and slowly pushed him into the pistil of the fire lotus. An arrow of blood shot out from Han Shuo's left index finger and fell directly into the big-headed zombie's mouth. At the same time, Han Shuo imprinted a seal of darkness magic on the big-headed zombie's body. A mass of pulsating purple flame covered the surface of Han Shuo's body according to his will. Then, Han Shuo shot out beams of black demonic light that twined around the big-headed zombie. When Han Shuo formed the shape of a lotus with a few drops of blood essence and forcefully clasped it onto the big-headed zombie's head, he seemed to have triggered some sort of restriction. In the blink of an eye, 24 blazing, blood-red beams of light suddenly shot out from the cave walls surrounding the fire lake, all converging towards the fire lotus. The dense fire origin energy seemed to be escorted by 24 ribbons as it frantically gathered towards the fire lotus in the center. The beautiful fire lotus blossomed with dazzling red light like a dancing flame. It slowly began to shrink its petals at a miraculous speed and trajectory, wrapping around the big-headed zombie that Han Shuo had ordered to stay in the pistil bit by bit. What's going on? What's going on? Marceau, who was 3 meters above Han Shuo, couldn't help but cry out when she saw the mysterious changes in her surroundings and felt the frantic gathering of the fire origin energy. However, Han Shuo's shrill screams completely drowned out Marceau's cries. This made Marceau, who was unaware of the situation, unable to guess what had happened to Han Shuo below. She didn't dare to descend another 3 meters to see what was happening below. The dense fire origin energy around the fire lake, under the influence of the formation, was all channeled towards the center of the fire lotus, providing sufficient nourishment for the fire elite zombie's formation. On the day that the fire elite zombie was formed, the fire lotus that it nurtured would very likely become a treasure that the fire elite zombie could control and help him obtain all sorts of strange abilities. 24 beams of blood-red light gathered towards the fire lotus in the center from the cave walls. The fire origin energy that had lingered in the entire place of extreme fire for tens of thousands of years was slowly nourishing the big-headed zombie's body through the fire lotus. With the protection of the fire lotus pistil, the big-headed zombie didn't need to endure the scorching heat. It only needed to continuously absorb all sorts of pure energy and cultivate according to the imprint that Han Shuo had left in its mind. It would be able to continuously change its body and become a powerful fire elite zombie. Roar! A terrifying roar sounded from above the fire lake. The Lord of the Flames seemed to have sensed the changes in the kingdom of fire and couldn't help but roar. Through the Yin demon's observation, Han Shuo discovered that the Lord of the Flames, who had a slight upper hand despite fighting 1 against 3, had already given up on the battle against the Golden Dragon, Cyclops, and Silver Ape. It roared as it moved its enormous volcanic body, slowly walking towards the largest crevice in the valley. The fire lotus that was nurtured in the fire lake was a fire attribute treasure. It contained some strange power. As the master of the kingdom of fire, the Lord of the Flames must have some sort of connection with the fire lotus. Perhaps the Lord of the Flames had already left an imprint on the fire lotus and treated it as a taboo item. Han Shuo had used the demonic magic formation and used this taboo item without permission. He had even imprinted a living being within it to absorb the enormous amount of fire origin energy in the surroundings. This must have alarmed the Lord of the Flames and made it come over to understand everything that had happened. At this moment, the fire lotus petals had already shrunk into a bud, slowly sinking into the fire lake. When Han Shuo saw this, he immediately understood that he had succeeded. He began to scream in pain as he slowly moved upwards. Up until now, all of Han Shuo's arrangements had gone smoothly. However, he still had no way of predicting the final outcome. According to Chu Kanglin's memories, Han Shuo knew that after the fire lotus petals had shrunk, it would be very difficult to open it again without special methods and opportunities. However, as the master of this fire lake, Han Shuo had no way of knowing if the Lord of the Flames had a way to open the fire lotus. From the very beginning, Han Shuo knew that he wasn't completely confident in this matter. The reason why he had to do this was because he had no other choice. Otherwise, if he lost this opportunity, he didn't know when the Lord of the Flames would leave this place of extreme fire, nor would he have a fire grand magus bring him into this strange space. Therefore, even if he wasn't completely confident, Han Shuo had to make use of this rare opportunity to plant the big-headed zombie into the fire lotus. As for the final outcome, whether the Lord of the Flames would be able to open the fire lotus, or whether it would kill the big-headed zombie, this wasn't something that Han Shuo could grasp. It could only be said that it all depended on the will of the heavens. As Han Shuo's figure slowly rose into the air, he purposefully withdrew the purple flames protecting his legs and used the high temperature of the fire lake to roast his legs. In an instant, Han Shuo's trousers were charred black. His legs were exposed to the blazing heat, and in the blink of an eye, a large area was burnt by the flames. "Save me!" A mournful scream rang out from Han Shuo's mouth, his voice urgent and desperate. However, under the cover of the thick smoke, Han Shuo didn't have any expression of pain on his face. Instead, he was terrifyingly calm. The burning pain from the large area of his legs seemed to be happening to someone else's body. He was currently looking at the two people in the boundary above him with a bright expression. Fire Grand Magus Marceau watched as the fire lotus slowly sank into the lake of fire. She seemed to be extremely discouraged and had a face full of regret. She didn't seem to care about Han Shuo's shouts as she kept murmuring, "My fire lotus, my fire lotus." On the other hand, it was the female knight Sophie who showed sympathy for Han Shuo. She was drenched in sweat as she panted. She pulled on the corner of Marceau's clothes and said anxiously, "Let's save him first." Under Sophie's tugging, Fire Grand Magus Marceau suddenly woke up with a start. She looked down with a mournful expression and sighed. She nodded unwillingly and started chanting a magic incantation. A strong magical wave suddenly enveloped Han Shuo's body. Amidst the crackling sparks, Han Shuo's body was pulled by the fire element and suddenly squeezed into the boundary that Sophie and Marceau were in. When Han Shuo had left earlier, a part of the 3 to 4 meter magic boundary had been cut off. Now that Han Shuo's body had squeezed in again, the part that had been cut off didn't return. The magic boundary that Sophie and Marceau had been in suddenly became very crowded with Han Shuo's addition. Right now, Han Shuo's face was pale and weak. A large area from his knees to his feet had been roasted by the high temperature of the fire lake. Not only did it look very horrifying, but it also gave off an unpleasant smell. In the crowded boundary, the Fire Grand Magus didn't seem to be too willing to lean against Han Shuo due to her identity, age, or other reasons. She forcefully retreated to a corner, causing the limp Han Shuo and Sophie to lean against each other. Han Shuo moved his body with difficulty, and pretended to cry out in pain, seeming to want to sit up from his limp position. When his 2 hands were supporting the invisible boundary, he couldn't avoid touching Sophie's thighs because of the squeezing of the boundary. The temperature within the boundary had been maintained at around 40 degrees after Han Shuo had left. Sophie was still sweating profusely, and her entire body was wet and uncomfortable. Her clothes were all wet and stuck to her curvaceous body. Under Han Shuo's unintentional touch, he could feel the taut fullness of Sophie's thighs. He could even feel the powerful strength contained within her extremely elastic thighs. Originally, the burning of his 2 legs was intentional. This degree of burning wouldn't affect the function of Han Shuo's two legs. Apart from looking a bit frightening and causing some completely bearable pain to Han Shuo, it didn't have any other effects. Therefore, when Han Shuo pretended to be in pain and wanted to sit up, he let out low cries of pain. He wasn't as miserable as he appeared to be. Therefore, when his arm unavoidably touched Sophie's slender thighs, he actually had the leisure to evaluate the elasticity and beauty of Sophie's thighs in his heart. Perhaps it was because the boundary was indeed very crowded, but this kind of action, which could even be considered frivolous, was only treated by Sophie as a helpless and unintentional carelessness. It didn't cause her displeasure. Her crescent brows slightly furrowed. Instead, she looked at Han Shuo with some sympathy, and said with a kind heart, "I'll help you." Sophie's soft voice rang in Han Shuo's ears. Then, under the pained expression of Han Shuo clenching his teeth, her body slightly crouched down. Her slender hands supported Han Shuo's shoulders, helping Han Shuo get up and help him sit down in the boundary. During this process, due to the crowding of the boundary, it was inevitable that the two of them would come into physical contact. When Han Shuo's arms were propped up by her, the skin between their arms was tightly pressed against each other. Han Shuo even, accidentally, used his shoulder to touch Sophie's firm and curvy breasts. "Thank you very much!" When Sophie helped Han Shuo sit up from his limp posture, Han Shuo sincerely looked at Sophie and sincerely thanked her. "Don't mention it. This is what I should do." Sophie's delicate face had been red because of the high temperature, but the sharp-eyed Han Shuo still found that Sophie's face at this moment was even more rosy than before. Her expression also seemed a little shy. It seemed that the close contact between the two of them had indeed made this kind girl feel a little uncomfortable and embarrassed. Until now, Han Shuo and Sophie were still very close. Although Sophie deliberately kept a distance, because of the crowding of the boundary, the furthest distance between the two of their bodies would not exceed 20 centimeters. They could clearly smell each other's scent. The strong scent of a man on Han Shuo's body and the fragrant scent of sweat on Sophie's body blended together, and were breathed in by the two young men and women. This kind of peculiar scent was like a miraculous medicine, nourishing Han Shuo's restless heart and giving Han Shuo an inexplicable throbbing feeling. Han Shuo gazed deeply at Sophie. Perhaps it was because of the high temperature, but his gaze was burning fiercely. When Sophie turned her head away uncomfortably, Han Shuo greedily took a deep breath and his expression returned to normal. He smiled brightly at Phoebe, then slowly closed his eyes and began to adjust his breathing, not letting go of any time to recover his magical yuan. Through the Yin demon's spying, Han Shuo discovered that Phoebe's face was flushed red and her expression was a little unnatural. Her long eyelashes continuously fluttered, and while Han Shuo was adjusting his breathing, her bright eyes strangely focused on his body. Who knew what she was thinking? On the other side, Fire Grand Magus Marceau didn't notice Han Shuo and Sophie's movements. As the Lord of the Flames' loud roar approached, Marceau had no time to care about her surroundings. She was focused on controlling the boundary and slowly rising above the magma. Chapter 239. The Lord of the Flames' terrifying voice brought with it a violent power that could destroy the heavens and earth. It stopped all of the surging magma, and then flew down towards the fire lake at an even more ferocious speed. In that instant, the magic barrier that had been flying up with the magma was affected by the surging magma. Not only was it unable to rise higher, but it also rapidly fell towards the fire lake below. "Not good!" Fire Grand Magus Marceau exclaimed with a face full of fear. She said anxiously, "The Lord of the Flames is controlling the lava's descent. I've used up too much mental strength right now, so I can't control the barrier to fly out." Han Shuo, who had been resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Marceau. "So you're saying that we're trapped in the fire lake?" The kind-hearted female knight Sophie was also at her wits' end in this situation. She looked worriedly at the scorching magma that was sweeping towards them, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, Fire Grand Magus Marceau revealed a helpless expression and said to Han Shu and Sophie, "I'm very sorry. I don't think I'll be able to leave the Fire Lake with you two. I'm sorry." A strong magical fluctuation suddenly came from where Han Shu and Sophie were. Just like the last time when Han Shu had left the barrier, the area where Han Shu and Sophie were was cut apart by a sharp weapon amidst the sparks. It was directly removed from Marceau's barrier. Without the support of Marceau's magical elements, Han Shu and Sophie were immediately drowned in the surging magma and fell towards the fire lake. "Rather than the three of us dying together, it's better for me to escape alone. This is something that can't be helped, so please don't blame me," Marceau murmured coldly to herself as she watched the two quickly drown in the magma and fall towards the bottom. Roar! The earth-shattering howl grew closer and closer. Marceau was shocked and didn't dare to stay any longer. She activated the barrier that tightly wrapped around her body and slowly moved upwards against the magma that was pouring down like a waterfall. "Ah!" The Lord of the Flames' loud roar drowned out Sophie's screams as she fell towards the fire lake. Other than Han Shu, who was leaning close to her, no one else heard her screams of despair. Even female knights with great strength would instinctively show their cowardice when facing the threat of death and knowing that they were doomed to die. Such a desperate cry was not shameful. However, if this kind of exclamations were to ring incessantly in one's ears, no one would be able to bear it, and Han Shu was no exception. "Miss Sophie, can you stop screaming?" Han Shu said to the screaming Sophie with a pained expression as he held onto Sophie's waist with one arm. Strangely, the magical barrier that Marceau had left behind didn't suddenly shatter due to Marceau's departure. Instead, it was covered by a layer of dark light. The dense magma in the surroundings crashed into the dark barrier, but it didn't move at all. Only rays of dark light slowly seeped out of Han Shu's body and tightly attached to the dark barrier. Sophie quickly recognized the situation after being berated by Han Shu. Her bright eyes quickly scanned the surroundings and she suddenly cried out in joy. "We're actually not dead! Of course, I've just recovered a bit of my strength. I think we can still hold on until we leave this mysterious existence." Han Shu smiled at Sophie and comforted her. Suddenly, Sophie realized that her waist was still being held by Han Shu's arm. She immediately straightened her body uncomfortably and broke free from Han Shu's arm, maintaining a tight distance from Han Shu. Seeing that Sophie had already woken up from her panic, Han Shu didn't purposely take advantage of her. He smiled apologetically at Sophie and said, "I had no choice just now, I hope you don't mind. The Lord of the Flames will return soon, we need to leave immediately. That Marceau is a famous figure in the Brute Merchant Alliance. To think that she would do such a thing. What a despicable person!" The kind Sophie was still brooding over Marceau's actions and angrily rebuked him. Han Shu felt that it was only natural and didn't think that Marceau's actions were inappropriate. After all, the three of them had only met by chance and didn't have any true friendship. In times of danger, of course one had to think for oneself. Marceau's actions were also because she had no choice. Han Shu didn't hold any grudges against her. This was because if he was in Marceau's shoes, Han Shu would definitely have done the same. However, Han Shu didn't say much and only shrugged with a smile. He then focused on circulating his magical yuan and slowly flew towards the lava. At Han Shu's current level of magical yuan, he was able to naturally form a protective shield around his body with his adept control of magical yuan. As long as his magical yuan didn't run out, Han Shu would be able to keep the shield unbroken and resist the invasion of the lava and flames. Compared to Marceau's previous boundary, Han Shu's protective barrier had a moderate temperature. The various threats in the surroundings couldn't penetrate the barrier and land on Han Shu and Sophie. The two of them flew at an extremely fast speed and passed through the layers of lava. They quickly identified a relatively narrow crack and charged upwards against the blazing sparks. During this process, Sophie had been paying attention to Han Shu's protective barrier. She had a puzzled expression on her face, and even more carefully extended her hand to touch the protective barrier that was circulating with black light. She felt a strange sensation, and was lost in thought. As he flew upwards, Han Shuo's expression was relaxed and confident. "Hey, let's meet up above!" Han Shuo looked down at Marceau beneath his feet and said this with a smile. He then circulated his magical yuan and rushed towards the crack in the ground, ignoring Marceau's astonished gaze. One of the Yin demons remained at the lake of fire below, while the other two remained in the valley. Han Shuo had observed the entire situation clearly through the three Yin demons. When the Lord of the Flames abandoned its three opponents and returned to the Kingdom of Fire, out of the three powerful creatures that were fighting it, only the silver giant ape went forward to stop it. However, it was easily beaten back by the Lord of the Flames. Without the Golden Dragon and Cyclops' cooperation, the giant silver ape had no way of dealing with the Lord of the Flames. It could only watch as the Lord of the Flames entered the largest crack in the ground and sank into the depths of the ground along with the thick, turbulent magma. After the Lord of the Flames disappeared, the proud Golden Dragon seemed to finally remember the purpose of coming to the valley and immediately began to attack its ally, the Cyclops. The Cyclops seemed to have known this would happen, and began to fight with the Golden Dragon. They forcefully blasted open the valley's passageway and gradually fought their way out. When the Lord of the Flames fell into the Kingdom of Fire, the giant silver ape knew that it didn't have any more chances. It pounded its chest and stomped its feet as it left the passageway the Golden Dragon had torn open, disappearing without a trace after a few leaps. This information had been obtained by Han Shuo through the two Yin demons he had left in the valley. The only Yin demon left near the Lake of Fire had also finally discovered the Lord of the Flames' enormous body. It had mixed with the turbulent magma and was slowly sinking to the bottom of the Lake of Fire. Roar! A long howl sounded from a crack in the ground as a sharp black arrow shot out and instantly hovered in the air above the valley. Having escaped death, Han Shuo was in such a good mood that he let out another long howl. The black light swirling around his body cracked and shattered like an eggshell. Streaks of black light intertwined together like lightning and slowly sank into Han Shuo's skin. These wriggling black lights writhed on Han Shuo's exposed skin like nimble tattoos, displaying a soul-stirring, bewitching beauty. As Han Shuo let out a drawn-out dragon's roar, the black lights slowly receded and Han Shuo's skin returned to its normal color. "How much longer are you going to hold on for?" Sophie watched the series of changes on Han Shuo's body and couldn't help but glare at Han Shuo to remind him when she saw Han Shuo clinging to her waist. Because the protective barrier had shattered, Han Shuo was afraid that Sophie would fall directly from the sky. Therefore, in his panic just now, he'd once again used his right hand to wrap around Sophie's slender waist, feeling the elasticity and softness of Sophie's slender waist. The long howl from before had been indescribably pleased and satisfied. I had no choice, I had no choice. Han Shuo didn't feel the slightest bit awkward as he chuckled. "I don't know if you'll fall to your death if I let go." Looking unkindly at Han Shuo, Sophie glared at Han Shuo and pointed below. "The ground is only a few meters above me, and there's an empty space around that hasn't been covered by lava. Do you think a knight who dares come to the dark forest alone will fall to his death from a few meters in the air? I don't think so. You should have warned me earlier." Han Shuo rubbed his head and grinned cheekily. He tightened his right hand around Sophie's slender waist, feeling the softness and wonder of her slender waist for a moment before letting go and letting her fall to the ground. Roar! Suddenly, the Lord of the Flames' strange howls sounded from the depths of the ground. Through the observation of the Yin demon below, Han Shuo discovered that the Lord of the Flames' enormous body had completely melded into the Lake of Fire. The fire lotus that had sunk into the Lake of Fire was held in its iron-like palm. Waves of enormous intent descended from the Lord of the Flames into the fire lotus through some mysterious power. Just as Han Shuo was on tenterhooks, the Lord of the Flames suddenly raised its head and howled repeatedly. It held the closed fire lotus as if it had found a treasure and carefully caressed it. The killing intent on its body vanished, and it hugged the fire lotus to its chest like a mother. The entire lake of fire was instantly filled with a strange motherly love. It can't be treating the fire elite zombie as its own child, can it? Han Shaw was flabbergasted as he guessed incredulously. Chapter 240. A ray of red light flew out, and the panting fire Grand Magus Marceau finally managed to escape with great difficulty. Her wrinkled face was filled with dejection as she looked around with flickering eyes, wanting to get a clear picture of Tanai's current situation. After being tormented by the four behemoths, the beautiful scenery and flower-filled valley was completely destroyed. The ground was filled with ravines and streams of magma flowed everywhere. Inside the holes that were full of potholes, raging flames were burning, and the air was filled with the smell of burnt flesh. Marceau looked around and heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that the golden dragon, Cyclops, and silver ape weren't there. When she discovered that Han Shu and Sophie were coldly looking at her from afar, she forced out an ugly smile and explained apologetically. "Congratulations on regaining a new life. The situation just now was special. I hope you can understand. I had no choice." Sophie's pretty face was full of disdain. She snorted and didn't look at Marceau again. She said to Han Shaw, who was hovering in the air, "Let's go. There's nothing to say to this kind of person." "Yes, I think so too." Han Shaw agreed with Sophie's suggestion and looked coldly at Marceau from afar. A fiendish aura naturally overflowed, but he didn't make a move. Instead, he took the lead and flew out of the valley. Sophie chanted a strange summoning incantation, and the white and beautiful Pegasus once again appeared in the scorching hot valley, naturally carrying Sophie on its back. The fiery clouds in the sky above the valley gradually dissipated after losing the control of the Lord of the Flames' terrifying power. The mountain wind blew down from above, and the raging flames were slowly extinguished. The formation of the fire elite zombie definitely didn't take a day or two. It would be a slow process. From the Een Demon's observation, not only did the Lord of the Flames not have the slightest bit of malice towards the life within the Fire Lotus, it even carefully protected him like a child. The Fire Elite Zombie's safety was definitely not an issue. Once the Fire Elite Zombie had absorbed enough energy, it would certainly emerge from the Fire Lotus. At that time, this place of extreme fire would also become the Fire Elite Zombie's Kingdom of Fire. Using his connection with the Fire Elite Zombie, Han Shaw could use the Fire Elite Zombie to sweep away all the fire attribute spiritual stones that had been bred in the surrounding place of extreme fire. Therefore, he wasn't in a hurry to collect them. As Han Shaw flew out of the valley, Sophie rode on her beautiful Pegasus and followed behind Han Shaw unhurriedly, disappearing into the valley with Han Shaw. Fire Grand Magus Marceau watched as Han Shaw and Sophie left. Her expression was uncertain, but she didn't make any moves. She only looked at the sky where the burning clouds had receded after Han Shaw and Sophie had disappeared for a while. She then used the levitation spell to quickly rise into the sky. As soon as they left the valley, Han Shaw immediately communicated with Dark Dragon Gilbert through his mind. Little Skull had already been sent back to the other dimension. A Een demon that had stayed in the fire lake also flew out of the crack in the ground and converged on Han Shaw's side. When the Een demon returned to Han Shaw's side, Han Shaw also sensed Dark Dragon Gilbert's position. Behind him, female knight Sophie rode on a Pegasus and followed Han Shaw unhurriedly. A pair of beautiful eyes focused on Han Shaw's body and shone with a faint luster. No one knew what she was thinking. Han Shaw had a very good impression of this female knight named Sophie. When Han Shaw had flown up from the Fire Lotus and pretended to be injured, it was Sophie who had persuaded the hesitant Marceau to let him enter the boundary. When Han Shaw walked into the boundary, Sophie didn't mind the horrible and unpleasant smell on Han Shaw's feet and helped Han Shaw to sit up. Sophie's kind behavior won Han Shaw's favor. So much so that when Marceau let go, Han Shaw immediately enveloped Sophie in his protective barrier and expended even more magical yuan to protect Sophie. "I think we should split up." Sophie, who had been following Han Sho silently, finally spoke faintly after they were a distance away from the valley. Turning around, Han Sho looked deeply at Sophie and revealed a radiant smile, saying, "You are a kind and righteous knight. It's a pleasure to meet you." Their separation was imminent. Sophie also stared deeply at Han Sho with interest, as though she wanted to memorize Han Sho's appearance in her heart. After a while, she smiled sweetly and said, "Brian, if you have time to visit Kasi Empire, I can be your guide." "Oh!" Han Sho was delighted. He then asked with interest, "Then how should I find you?" Sophie glared at Han Sho reproachfully and said strangely, "Could it be that you've really just made your debut? You don't even know who I am?" Shaking his head, Han Sho said amusedly, "Are you very famous?" "Kasi Empire's Sacred Knight Solo is my father. I'm the only Earth Knight in Kasi Empire who rides a Pegasus. As long as you come to Kasi Empire and want to find me, you will definitely be able to find me. Goodbye, interesting scoundrel." Sophie left behind a string of bell-like giggles and left in another direction on her Pegasus. She flew into the horizon like a little fairy and disappeared in the blink of an eye. She was actually the daughter of a sacred knight. Han Sho was greatly shocked. Only now did he truly care about Sophie's identity. He didn't expect her to be born into a wealthy family, and have such a terrifyingly powerful father. In the current profound continent, only the strongest experts would add the word sacred to their professions. Regardless of whether it was a sacred magus, sacred sword master, or sacred knight, they were all publicly recognized as the most powerful figures on the continent. No matter which country they were in, these people would have an illustrious position and be revered by all citizens. Such a figure possessed terrifying strength. Such a figure could even reverse the outcome of a war. They existed as the protector of a country and possessed strength that even the king had no choice but to treat with caution. Sophie's father was actually a sacred knight. No wonder she was so confident. When Han Sho expressed that he had never heard of her, she rolled her eyes fiercely at Han Sho. However, in the legends, there was another kind of existence that surpassed the boundary of sacred, and possessed the title of God. They were an existence closest to the gods and were known as demigods in the secular world. They were the pinnacle of their professions. In hundreds and thousands of years, only a few characters had appeared. They were known as magic gods, sword gods, and divine knights. Such demigod existences possessed the destructive power to destroy the heavens and earth. They had strength comparable to the gods. If they could break through their limits, and take another step forward, they would be able to break through the shackles and become true gods. It was a pity that the current profound continent didn't have such legendary figures with the word God. Those with the word sacred were already the pinnacle existences on the continent. Sophie flew away on her Pegasus. Han Sho only gasped in surprise at Sophie's identity for a moment before flying in the direction of Gilbert's location. Along the way, there were huge footprints and traces of an intense battle everywhere. The 2-meter-wide footprints were obviously from the Cyclops. The towering ancient trees in the surroundings were broken and toppled in rows, and some of the small hills were left with bombardment marks. With just a few glances, Han Sho was certain that the Cyclops and the Golden Dragon must have left the valley from here while fighting. Gilbert must have secretly tailed the two enormous beings. Even now, Gilbert was still following the two powerful beings. Han Sho could sense his constantly shifting position. Without taking a closer look at his surroundings, Han Sho followed his connection with Gilbert and activated the art of the demonic ninth heavens with all his might, chasing after Gilbert like a rainbow. Previously, Tanai had been a sea of fire. Only after leaving the valley did he realize that it was already late at night. The stars shone brilliantly and the moonlight sprinkled down like flowing water. It was a pity that the scenery along the way wasn't as beautiful as it seemed due to the battle between the two powerful beings. As Han Sho flew at full speed for a great distance, he could already hear a tremendous rumble in the distance. It was as if mountains were collapsing and the earth was splitting. The earth seemed to be trembling from the tremendous sound as the distance between him and Gilbert gradually decreased. Just as Han Sho was flying at high speed, thinking that he would be able to see Gilbert soon, the tremendous rumble in the distance suddenly disappeared. Even the connection between Han Sho and Gilbert was severed at the same time. Han Sho couldn't sense his existence no matter how hard he tried. Greatly alarmed, Han Sho didn't understand what had suddenly happened. He was bewildered by this sudden turn of events. He once again increased his speed and flew towards the location of the black dragon he just sensed. The speed of a shooting star allowed Han Sho to arrive at the scene in a matter of minutes. The traces of the battle between the two enormous beings were still there, and there was a wide area shrouded in black fog in front of him. This area took up a large area. Han Sho stopped in the air and gazed down. He discovered that the black fog covered an area of 10 miles. The moonlight was completely obscured by the black fog and couldn't shine in at all. Han Sho couldn't see anything with his eyes either. Waves of fierce and thick evil aura filled the area shrouded in black fog. It seemed to contain some sort of terrifying danger. Han Sho couldn't sense the existence of any living beings within, as if he was completely blocked by the thick black fog. Hovering in the air for a while, Han Sho released the Yin demon and had it descend towards the area below. The shapeless Yin demon slowly descended and dove into the area shrouded in black fog with a whoosh. Suddenly, Han Sho's connection with the Yin demon was completely severed. The Yin demon that entered the black fog disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Han Sho couldn't sense the Yin demon's location in the slightest. By now, Han Sho was truly shocked. His connection with Gilbert was due to the power of the contract, so it was understandable that it was blocked by that area. However, the 3 Yin demons had been refined by Han Sho through his blood essence, and had disappeared without a trace after entering that area. This was truly a bit frightening. The area 10 miles in radius below was completely covered by thick black fog. He couldn't see anything at all. Han Sho could only feel that it was filled with an evil aura. He was certain that there was no simple existence within. The dark forest is full of wonders indeed. There's actually such a strange place. It looks like I have to go in and see what's going on if I want to understand what's going on. Han Sho looked at the area below and murmured to himself. He activated the magical yuan in his body and formed a protective shield around his body, slowly descending towards the area below. When Han Sho gradually approached the black fog, all sorts of negative emotions, such as fear, grief, rage, and madness, suddenly surged into Han Sho's mind. It was as if a force was trying to invade Han Sho and make him lose himself in an instant. However, Han Sho, in the bloodlust realm, had absorbed all sorts of negative emotions from the dead during his last 2 massacres. He was already used to the invasion of this kind of fear and madness. He wasn't affected in the slightest, and his expression remained calm and composed. "This is really interesting." Han Sho couldn't help but murmur in surprise when he felt the negative emotions surge into his mind. His body suddenly sank and he landed directly in this area. In an instant, the training he'd lost with Gilbert and the Yin demon was instantly re-established. It looked like the black fog only blocked the communication between the outside and the inside, and couldn't stop the people within from communicating with each other. He didn't hurry to move through his connection with Gilbert. Instead, Han Sho looked around with bright eyes, planning to first imprint the situation in this area into his mind so that he could make the right decision when danger arose. Due to the presence of the thick black fog, Han Sho's vision was affected. He could only see things 10 meters away from him. In the dark forest that was densely covered with plants, this area shrouded in black mist seemed so unusual and unique. There wasn't a single plant within a 10-meter radius, only barren rocks of all sorts of dark colors. There was an oily green stream flowing beneath Han Sho's feet. The stream flowed soundlessly without any fish. Looking up at the sky, the thick black fog covered everything. There wasn't a bit of light to be seen. The entire space was dark and gloomy, filled with the smell of desolation and death. "Oh!" Han Sho exclaimed. Through the Een demon's observation, he saw a strange stone tablet. There were even some words carved on the upright stone tablet. This made Han Sho decide to immediately go over and take a look. Chapter 241. When Han Sho arrived at the stone tablet, he could only see a single line of words engraved on the stone tablet from afar: Ermite Cotton. It was actually the name Ermite Cotton. This simple line of words had already shocked Han Sho. As a citizen of the Lancelot Empire, he had heard of this deified figure like thunder. Every citizen of the Lancelot Empire could recount his deeds in detail. As the greatest existence in the dark element in the history of the Lancelot Empire, Ermite Cotton was a legendary dark magus with the strength of a demigod. 500 years ago, it was Ermite Cotton who assisted the first king of the Lancelot Empire in establishing the Lancelot Empire. It was precisely with the help of such a figure that the founding king of the Lancelot Empire conquered all foreign races, drove away the barbaric orcs, and expelled the greedy and despicable goblins. He stood out among the major powers and established political power on this land, allowing the Lancelot Empire to steadily stand tall on this land for the past 500 years. It was said that Ermite Cotton was a legendary dark magus with the power to destroy the heavens and the earth. Such a powerful figure in that era not only created the existence of the Lancelot Empire, but also forever became a legend. He was revered by all the citizens of the Lancelot Empire for 500 years. Until now, his fame and greatness had not been surpassed by any of his descendants. Ermite Cotton's entire life was accompanied by great legends. He had defeated countless experts, opened up new frontiers for the Lancelot Empire, and destroyed the fighting spirit and confidence of all foreign races that resisted. Wherever the iron hooves of the Lancelot Empire passed, all races would crawl on the ground and pledge allegiance to the Lancelot Empire. However, such a terrifying demigod-like existence had mysteriously disappeared without a trace at the peak of his life. At that time, the Lancelot Empire was at its peak and had conquered all the surrounding countries. It was the time when Ermite Cotton should have been enjoying all the glory. However, he had mysteriously disappeared. The first king of the Lancelot Empire was unable to accept the departure of his most sincere friend. He had mobilized all the forces in the world to search for him, but to no avail. There were many different versions of legends about his mysterious departure. Some said that he was tired of fighting and went into seclusion. Some said that he transcended everything and went from being a demigod to becoming a god. Some said that although he defeated countless strong people in his life, he also suffered dozens of injuries. In the end, the weak body of a sorcerer could no longer bear the pain in his old age, and so he tragically died of illness. However, legends were just legends after all. In the absence of concrete evidence, all theories were illusory. The mysterious disappearance of Ermite Cotton had been an unsolvable mystery for over 500 years. However, there was a stone tablet with Ermite Cotton's name carved on it in this strange place shrouded in black fog. From the shape of the stone tablet, and the meaning of the words carved on it, Han Sho was certain that it was a type of tombstone used to commemorate the dead. This filled Han Sho's heart with shock. He couldn't help but want to approach the tombstone and carefully examine it. It was at this moment that Gilbert took the initiative to approach Han Sho through his connection with Han Sho. Han Sho could even feel Gilbert's anxiety. Han Sho intended to take a closer look at the tombstone, but had no choice but to give up on that thought as Gilbert rapidly approached. He raised his guard and prepared to act. With a flip, Han Sho landed behind a large boulder. At the same time, he released the Een demon in Gilbert's direction. A tremendous rumble rapidly approached from afar. In dragon form, Gilbert actually didn't fly. Instead, he slithered his body like a huge python as he slithered towards Han Sho. The Cyclops' enormous body was hot on Gilbert's tail. The golden dragon that had been fighting with the Cyclops was also slithering on the ground like Gilbert. He also didn't use the dragon race's innate ability to fly. "Great Master, hurry and save your pitiful servant!" As he rapidly approached, Gilbert's draconic eyes shone with a frantic light as he continuously shouted in a deep, heavy voice. Hanshaw, who had fallen behind the boulder, couldn't help but curse when he heard Gilbert yelling for him to save him before he even got close. "Stupid dragon, everyone will know that there's someone in front of us if you're making so much noise. How can I ambush you?" Seeing that he couldn't hide and ambush Gilbert, Hanshaw cursed lowly and leapt into the air, flying towards Gilbert. A domineering howl rang out, informing Gilbert of his presence. Through the demon's surveillance, Hanshaw discovered that both the Cyclops and the Golden Dragon seemed to be chasing after Gilbert. He didn't know what wicked thing Gilbert had done to make the two enemies join forces to kill Gilbert first. Gilbert, who had been terrified along the way, calmed down slightly when he heard Hanshaw's piercing howl. He then crawled over with even more effort. He yelled before he even reached Hanshaw. "Two against one, how shameless and wicked! Damn stinky bug, you almost ambushed us to death when we were tired from the battle. That's fine, but you actually brought us to this forbidden land and left us with no way out. You're the most shameless and wicked!" Contrary to Hanshaw's expectations, the Cyclops actually let out a thunderous curse amidst the crazed roar. "A shameless person who sneaks into someone else's territory has no right to criticize others." Gilbert seemed to gain a bit more confidence when he arrived in front of Hanshaw. He turned back to mock the Cyclops with disdain, and quickly moved his huge body to stand in line with Hanshaw. "You're pissing me off! You damned bug, I'm going to kill you!" The Cyclops was infuriated and roared at the sky. His single eye shone with a terrifying light as he pounced at Gilbert. Most of the Cyclops' body had been burned by the Lord of the Flames, and his two huge green palms were a mess of blood and flesh. It looked like the battle with the Lord of the Flames and the battle with the Golden Dragon had indeed left him with quite a few injuries. "Shut up! You can hit him and curse him, but you're not allowed to mention the words bug or stinky bug in front of me, or I'll kill you first, you damned one-eyed thief!" The Golden Dragon roared angrily behind the Cyclops. The Golden Dragon's body wasn't in good shape either. Not only were large patches of his golden scales black, but some of them were also stained with blood. Even his huge head had a bloody scar. It looked like he'd suffered serious injuries from the consecutive battles. "You're a mad dragon, do you think I'm afraid of you?" The Cyclops and the Golden Dragon had fought their way out of the valley, and had long since become enraged. Although he was extremely angry at Gilbert's despicable actions, he didn't have a good impression of the Golden Dragon either. He immediately turned around to face the Golden Dragon, seeming to want to fight at any moment. This was indeed the case. The proud Golden Dragon couldn't take any provocation. He had already roared and charged forward after the Cyclops' roar and immediately began to fight with the Cyclops. He'd forgotten his target this time and didn't care about Gilbert's life or death. What's going on?" Hanshaw felt a headache coming on as he watched the two enormous beings fight in front of him. He couldn't help but turn his head to look at Gilbert and ask with a wry smile. I saw the two of them fighting and followed them from behind. I took advantage of the fact that they were both exhausted and moved a boulder the size of a small mountain over, wanting to take the opportunity to smash them both to death. Who would have thought that they'd be so clever and actually dodged the boulder? Then they chased after me. I was so flustered that I didn't know where I was going. I ran into this strange area. The two of them had lost their minds and followed me without thinking. Then I discovered that my power had been sealed. Not only did I not have the magic to spray poison and flames, but I also couldn't fly. Of course, that stupid Golden Dragon couldn't fly either and could only crawl like me. It seemed that even the Cyclops' power had been sealed. After a short moment of panic, they made me their primary target and started to attack me together. I had no choice but to come and find you." Gilbert didn't care at all and cackled wickedly as he explained Hanshaw's despicable actions. Looking at his proud expression, it was obvious that he wasn't ashamed of it, but rather proud of it. You really are shameless, Han Shaw commented after listening to Gilbert's explanation. I learned this from you. Gilbert cackled and pushed all the blame onto Han Shaw, as if he'd been so pure and kind when he'd left the underground world. Rumble! A huge collision sound came from where the Cyclops and Golden Dragon were fighting. All sorts of dark-colored rocks in the surroundings exploded as the Cyclops and Golden Dragon fell to the side in exhaustion. There was a huge crater between them. Just as the two enormous beings struggled to stand up and were about to continue fighting to the death, the Cyclops' thunderous voice sounded. Wait, why isn't this human affected by the environment? He can even fly in the air! The Golden Dragon and Gilbert also focused their puzzled gazes on Han Shaw as soon as these words left his mouth. They seemed to be filled with astonishment and confusion, as if Han Shaw, who was currently hovering in the air, was a peculiar existence. Human, there are no magical elements in this forbidden area. What right do you have to stand in the air? The Golden Dragon coiled up with difficulty and raised his head high. Even now, he hadn't forgotten the pride of his tribe and seemed to want to overwhelm Han Shaw with his aura. He looked down at Han Shaw from above and questioned him like he was interrogating a criminal. None of your business! Han Shaw responded very bluntly, taking an extremely dismissive attitude towards the Golden Dragon. As the Golden Dragon roared angrily, the Cyclops couldn't help but mock thunderously. Stupid dragon, do you think someone who can stand in the air in this forbidden area would be afraid of you? Haven't you heard of the legends of this forbidden area? Do you really want to die? The Golden Dragon strangely shut up as soon as the Cyclops' words left his mouth. His two head-sized eyes quickly flashed with a strange light as they focused on Han Shaw. The dragon's head shook in disbelief and growled lowly. Impossible! How is this possible? Great demigod existence, you must have surpassed the limits of humans. Please sprinkle your benevolent radiance, and take us away from this forbidden area. The Cyclops looked at Han Shaw with sincere entreaty in his single eye. His enormous body even bowed in a strange manner, expressing his respect towards Han Shaw. Even the Golden Dragon fell silent as he muttered to himself. He stared at Han Shaw without saying a word. As proud as he was, he couldn't immediately lower his head in front of Han Shaw, but his eyes expressed the same urgent pleading. What do you mean? Han Shaw was speechless as he looked at the two enormous beings. He rubbed his head in silence for a while, and couldn't help but ask in confusion. All the super-rank beings of the Dark Forest know the legend of this forbidden area. An earth-shattering battle occurred here 500 years ago. It's said that even true gods participated in it. That battle caused all the beings of the Dark Forest to tremble. The enormous commotion lasted for 3 days and 2 nights, and no one knew what had happened inside. The Cyclops' face was filled with lingering fear as he continued with a thunderous voice. None of the powerful beings that tried to go in and see what was going on were able to walk out of the forbidden area. None of the beings that mistakenly entered the forbidden area in the next 500 years were able to walk out. It's said that magic and fighting aura are all restricted in the forbidden area. All beings only possess pure physical strength, and are unable to take a single step out of the forbidden area. Only demigods that have surpassed the sacred rank can walk out of the forbidden area without these restrictions. Great human demigod existence, please take us away from here. Although the Golden Dragon didn't say a word, his gaze towards Han Shaw was completely different now. His eyes were filled with entreaty, and the Golden Dragon had no choice but to lower his proud head. I think you've made an error in judgment. Han Shaw looked helplessly at the two enormous beings and spread out his hands in explanation. I'm very sorry, I'm not a demigod existence. Chapter 242. How is this possible? If you weren't a demigod, how could you not be restricted by the forbidden land and remain in the air? The Cyclops couldn't believe this reality, or perhaps he was afraid that his hopes in Han Shaw would be dashed. He had a look of disbelief on his face. Han Shaw chanted the most basic necromancy magic. The summoning of skeletons that had worked every time had no effect this time. There were no abnormalities in the dark and desolate space. This necromancy magic had failed. So it was like this. Han Shuo's heart jumped, and he understood that the Cyclops wasn't lying. It looked like he really couldn't use any magic in this forbidden land. Wait! Han Shuo called out softly to the Cyclops and the golden dragon. His body abruptly rose into the air and broke through the shrouded black mist. However, just as Han Shuo felt that he should be able to leave the black mist, a vast, boundless, and strange power blocked the sky like a mountain weighing millions and millions of kilograms. Han Shuo fiercely broke through the air and crashed into it, causing great pain all over his body. However, he couldn't break through the shroud of black mist and leave this strange space. There was no need to try anymore. Han Shuo already understood that the entire area within 10 kilometers of the black mist was bound by this strange power. Just like the cemetery of death, he couldn't take a single step out of this place without opening the boundary. He landed dejectedly and helplessly, rubbing his buzzing head. Looking at the astonished Cyclops and golden dragon in front of him, Han Shuo spread his hands and apologized. As expected, the entire forbidden area is blocked by a boundary, and the same goes for the sky covered by the black mist. I think that we won't be able to leave the forbidden land without a special method. By now, the Cyclops and golden dragon had started to believe that Han Shuo wasn't a demigod like they'd guessed. With their hopes dashed, the two powerful beings didn't even have any interest in why Han Shuo could fly in the air when faced with the threat of death. They started to sigh in despair. Han Shuo could understand their dejection and despair when he saw that the two powerful beings had not only lost interest in his ability to fly, but had also stopped attacking Gilbert. Great Master, what should I do? I don't want to stay in this damned place forever. Let's continue my unfinished legend in the world of sensual pleasures. Gilbert was extremely anxious as he yelled in annoyance. Not a single being had been able to leave the Forbidden Land in the past 500 years. And there was no lack of super-rank magical creatures with long lifespans. However, when Han Shuo walked into this area, he only felt a desolate silence. There wasn't the slightest hint of life in this place. This meant that the super-rank magical creatures with long lifespans must have died long ago. Looking at the sky, Han Shuo discovered that the black mist that had permeated the entire area had gradually become thicker, perhaps because of his forceful charge. The dark, damp air was filled with an extremely dangerous and cruel aura. I think it's unlikely that we'll die of old age here even if we want to, Han Shuo murmured to himself as he sensed the changes in his surroundings, then suddenly cried out. Careful, there's danger! Gilbert, who had been blaming the heavens and others, as well as the despairing Cyclops and golden dragon, sensed the terrifying changes in their surroundings when they heard Han Shuo's cry of alarm. Their survival instincts immediately kicked in, and they also tensed up, paying attention to their surroundings and preparing to deal with any danger that might appear. Dark mist swirled in the sky, and balls of thick, inky black smoke that couldn't be dispelled could be seen from time to time. An evil and terrifying power swept towards them with the force of an avalanche, making it difficult for them to even breathe. The power that enveloped the boundary weighed down on everyone's backs like a million-ton mountain. Even colossal beings like the Cyclops and Golden Dragon howled in the face of this terrifying pressure. This was a sign that they couldn't bear the pressure and had lost control of their minds. Gilbert, who was only rank 1, had already prostrated himself on the ground like a limp snake, unable to even stand up. Magical yuan circulated madly as a dark, shiny shield enveloped Han Shuo's entire body. Bolts of black lightning circled within the shield as the pure magical yuan tempered the shield over and over again, making the shield's defensive power more and more resilient. In the end, the barrier that protected Han Shuo's body was as beautiful and enchanting as the purest piece of black jade, while Han Shuo was like a living fossil wrapped in black jade, full of demonic charm. The Forbidden Land had imprisoned all of the mysterious powers in this world, but the magical yuan from another dimension wasn't something that could be extinguished by the Forbidden Land. Therefore, When Han Shuo frantically circulated his magical yuan to form a protective shield that he tempered over and over again, he actually withstood the enormous pressure and stood proudly, unafraid. A pair of deep eyes widened as he observed the changes in the entire area. Not a single bit of the sinister aura in the sky escaped Han Shuo's senses. His originally frantic heart began to beat rapidly, and Han Shuo's steady breathing was no longer calm as he actually started to pant. The strange power that enveloped the entire Forbidden Land actually made Han Shuo feel a trace of familiarity. This kind of power was even more enticing to Han Shuo, who was in the bloodlust realm. A wondrous sensing force suddenly came from the demon infant in Han Shuo's body. The demon infant was like a small, bloodthirsty beast that suddenly smelled fresh blood. It could no longer endure the violent rampage in Han Shuo's body and urged Han Shuo anxiously, as if it wanted to do something. Pale green light flashed within the inky black fog that enveloped the entire area. Balls of light gathered towards Han Shuo's group of 3 from all directions. An enormous and terrifying aura of evil overflowed from the large balls of fog. As the pale green light continued to flash, the balls of fog gradually separated and changed shape, forming a sinister and terrifying face that pressed down. "No!" The Cyclops roared angrily and swung his enormous iron shovel at the sinister and terrifying face in the sky. The golden dragon also roared and swept his enormous dragon tail towards the sky, crazily sweeping towards the sinister and sinister face of a demon. However, the Cyclops and golden dragon's attacks landed in the air and had no effect on the malevolent phantoms. They fearlessly regrouped after dispersing and pressed downwards with frightening ferocity. "Fiend! It's a fiend!" Han Shuo suddenly cried out from within the protective barrier. Han Shuo, who was in the bloodlust realm, suddenly removed the protective barrier that covered his entire body. Rays of bloody light shot out from Han Shuo's body as a thick, murderous aura suddenly wrapped around Han Shuo's body. At the same time, a ray of red light shot out from the top of Han Shuo's head. The demon's layer edge's purple and red light flourished as it floated above Han Shuo's head, continuously spinning and dancing. The normally calm Han Shuo's expression suddenly became sinister and frightening. His white teeth formed the shape of a demon's and his eyes were blood red. The murderous aura emanated from his body and entangled with the demon's layer edge above his head. Blinding bloody light shot out from both of them at the same time. The sinister ghost faces that covered the entire area made shrieking expressions, but didn't make any sound. The evil faces that had been pressing down on the Cyclops and Golden Dragon revealed panicked expressions, seeming to want to escape at all costs. However, with Han Shuo's demon's layer edge as the center, an enormous whirlpool had formed in the sky above Han Shuo and the demon's layer edge. The whirlpool was more than 10 meters wide, and a murderous aura swirled within it. Blood-red light flashed as waves of evil energy filled it. All of the fiends that had gathered over seemed to be attracted by the enormous whirlpool. All of them wanted to flee in panic, but none of them were able to leave. Under the pull of the enormous whirlpool above Han Shuo's head, the fiends seemed to be tied down by invisible ropes no matter how far they escaped, slowly moving towards the whirlpool above Han Shuo's head. The terrifying pressure that could topple mountains and overturn the seas disappeared in an instant. Gilbert, who had been lying on the ground like a soft little snake, straightened his back after the pressure disappeared. He looked at Han Shuo, who was causing a huge commotion in the air, and murmured to himself, "Great Master, what the F***ck are you doing? Little dark dragon, just what kind of creature is your master? Just what is he doing? Why doesn't he have the presence of fighting aura or magic that a human should have?" The proud golden dragon couldn't help but roar when he saw the great commotion that Han Shuo had caused and heard Gilbert's murmurs. "No matter what, we would have already been killed by those evil ghost faces if his strange actions had resolved the danger we were in just now." The Cyclops stared deeply at Han Shuo with one eye, but didn't discover that Han Shuo had revealed even the slightest bit of fighting aura or magic. According to his understanding of this world, he understood that Han Sho might not be a demigod. However, Han Sho's current actions were illogical and had removed the enormous pressure that had enveloped the entire area. This made the Cyclops not dare to underestimate Han Sho at all. Now that his master had displayed his might, Gilbert also became arrogant. He raised his neck high and shouted loudly, "Damn it, how would I know what's going on? I just know that my master is very powerful. Otherwise, as a great dark dragon, why would I crawl at his feet?" The two enormous beings actually believed the dark dragon's words. Han Sho's current actions and the existence of Dark Dragon Gilbert were enough to prove that Han Sho was a powerful existence. It was because of this that the Golden Dragon and Cyclops accepted the Dark Dragon's rude shouts. It was as if they had forgotten the Dark Dragon's despicable actions from before and didn't dare attack him again. With such a powerful master, and this powerful human currently using his own unique method to remove the enormous pressure that enveloped the entire area, they didn't want to attack Gilbert at this time and attract unnecessary trouble for themselves. If this human stopped his current actions and that powerful threat appeared again, the Cyclops and Golden Dragon would still be dead. Therefore, the two enormous beings only snorted coldly at Gilbert's rude shouts and didn't say anything else. Seeing that Gilbert didn't know anything, the two didn't waste time asking him any more questions. They silently recovered their strength as they paid attention to Han Sho's changes. The malevolent demonic face that had previously floated in the air had now become a pitiful escapee that couldn't escape at all. Even the Shah that had left the area in the beginning were slowly pulled into the whirlpool one by one, no matter how terrified and panicky they were, under the enormous suction force of the whirlpool above his head. It was as if the bloody light whirlpool created by the demon's lair edge and the fiendish aura around Han Sho's body had a restraining effect on these strange fiendish spirits. In the end, not a single one of them was lucky enough to escape. Under the strong suction force of the enormous whirlpool, the pale green faces shrieked in silent terror as they turned into streaks of dark green light and merged into the whirlpool. The enormous whirlpool was like a strange tree. The enormous whirlpool above was like a lush foliage, while the thin passageways below were like the roots of the enormous tree. As the fiends were sucked in one by one, the enormous whirlpool was filled with a terrifying and chaotic energy. Blood red, black, and pale green, three kinds of strange lightning, carrying a thick evil aura, slowly converged into the demon's lair edge and Han Sho's body through the rhizome-like passageways. The whirlpool spun faster and faster, and the demon's lair edge, which had absorbed a large amount of evil aura, shone brightly. The ferocious might of a peerless weapon was gradually revealed. Violent howls continuously sounded from the demon's lair edge, causing the Cyclops and the other two enormous beings to tremble in fear. On the other hand, the killing aura around Han Sho had condensed into a mist. The thick killing aura faintly formed the shape of a giant overlooking the earth behind Han Sho. The giant was more than 10 meters tall in the air and possessed an extremely terrifying ferocity. It looked exactly the same as Han Sho, who was a small dot on the ground with blood-red pupils. This spectacle continued for a day and a night. The enormous whirlpool above Han Sho's head disappeared, and all the fiends in the area also disappeared. Even the giant that had appeared behind Han Sho slowly flew back into Han Sho's body. Only the demon's lair edge continued to shine brightly as it floated above Han Sho's head. Roar! An evil and terrifying howl suddenly rang out from Han Sho's mouth. Han Sho suddenly stood up with blood-red pupils, as if a peerless soul had awakened from the depths of the earth. He glared viciously at the Cyclops, Golden Dragon, and Dark Dragon Gilbert, causing them to tremble from the depths of their hearts. Chapter 243. What does he want to do? The proud Golden Dragon couldn't help but cry out in alarm when he saw the extremely evil Han Sho glaring at him with bloodshot eyes. How would I know? Oh my great master, just what do you want to do? I am your most humble servant, Gilbert. The little black dragon had just straightened his back when he saw the ferocious Han Sho walk towards him step by step. A thick wave of fiendish aura swept towards him like a wave of blood, and he immediately screamed in panic. Unfortunately, at this moment, Han Sho's expression was ferocious and terrifying. Both of his pupils had turned blood red. He let out another howl towards the heavens. Like a bloodthirsty beast, he was already charging towards this side. The fiendish aura around Han Sho had thickened into the shape of a red mist, and as Han Sho leapt forward, a ferocious aura that could topple mountains and overturn seas surged forward. "Not good! He's lost his mind!" The Cyclops' thunderous voice suddenly cried out in alarm, already preparing for the worst. At this moment, the golden dragon was standing closest to Han Sho. The proud golden dragon had become Han Sho's first target. Amidst the roiling flames, Han Sho had already descended upon the golden dragon's head and smashed his fist towards the golden dragon's enormous head. If it had only been Han Sho's fist, perhaps the golden dragon wouldn't have cared too much. After all, Han Sho's size was not on the same level as the golden dragon's, and the strength and area of effect of his fist were very limited. It would be very difficult for him to cause too much damage to a colossus like the golden dragon. However, when this fist came crashing down, the fiendish aura around Han Sho naturally condensed into the shape of a crimson fist the size of a small mountain. This fist completely enveloped the golden dragon's body, and the enormous pressure made it hard for him to breathe. It carried with it a destructive wave as it came crashing down. The proud golden dragon let out a pained groan and muttered a few dirty words. He hadn't recovered much of his strength yet, but he had no choice but to stretch out his coiled body. His wriggling tail, like the Great Wall of China, suddenly slammed into the incoming fist. Rumble! An earth-shattering sound came from the collision between the giant fist and the golden dragon's tail. The rocks around the golden dragon exploded one after another. The golden dragon let out a painful roar. Its straight and winding tail seemed to be unable to bear the weight as it trembled and bent together. Its huge body that was more than 10 meters tall was directly smashed to the ground by this punch. "Waha, great master, your humble master is proud of you! You used your strength to directly beat the golden dragon, who has the strongest physical body of the dragon clan, to the ground. I, Gilbert of the Dark Dragon clan, have witnessed this historical moment." "You are indeed worthy of being my chosen master." The ferocious and terrifying punch smashed the golden dragon to the ground. The Cyclops' single eye was filled with the light of disbelief, while the dark dragon Gilbert was crazily shouting and yelling. My great, heroic, miraculous, noble master, what do you want to do? Don't tell me you're planning to make a move on your most adorable, most loyal, most honest, and most humble Gilbert. However, Dark Dragon Gilbert's flattery was not over yet. The giant fist of bloody light had disappeared, but when Han Sho's foot was about to kick out, a large blood-red foot appeared in the air. Its target was the rambling Dark Dragon Gilbert. Without waiting for Gilbert's panicked voice to finish, this foot was already directly stomping down on Dark Dragon Gilbert's large head. If things went wrong, Gilbert would never be able to make a sound again. Roar! Just as the Dark Dragon roared in despair, a towering figure suddenly rushed out. A large green arm forcibly helped Dark Dragon Gilbert block this foot. After a series of rumbling vibrations, the green Cyclops sat on the ground and fearfully looked at the sinister face of Han Sho, who was slowly descending with a fierce roar. "Damned stupid dragon, he has already lost his mind and is no longer your master. Do you want to F*King die?" The golden dragon, who had finally stood up from his crouching position, couldn't help but shake his head and shake his tail as he roared loudly. He wanted Dark Dragon Gilbert to recognize the truth. Dark Dragon Gilbert seemed to have come to his senses. In the depths of his heart, he was unwilling to believe that Han Sho would kill him. He continued to muddle-headedly mumble to himself. "How is this possible? How could my master attack me? Stupid dragon, although I don't know what happened, I'm afraid that your master has truly lost his mind. He's very, very powerful now. That unlucky golden dragon and I don't have much strength left. Only the three of us together may be able to deal with your master. The Cyclops watched as Han Sho slowly descended from the sky. A vast and boundless murderous aura had firmly locked onto the three of them. He couldn't help but anxiously yell at Dark Dragon Gilbert. Shaking his large head blankly, Gilbert felt bitter inside. Although he felt despair and grief at Han Sho's ruthless and merciless killing, he still stubbornly said, "No, absolutely not. I can't fight my master with you, even if I die." "Idiot, the three of us together can't kill him. We only need to resist or restrain him. We're doing this to save him, you stupid and damned dark dragon. Do you understand the meaning of this?" On the other side, the golden dragon roared wildly in exasperation in the face of the threat of death. "That's right, stupid dragon, we're saving him, saving him." "Idiot!" The Cyclops immediately understood after hearing the golden dragon's words and roared in agreement. The dragon race was a proud race. If it weren't for special opportunities, it would be very difficult for them to be tamed by the humans that they looked down upon. However, once a dragon established a contract with a human, their loyalty was unquestionable as long as their master was alive. Gilbert had spent some time with Han Sho. Han Sho's actions were very much in line with the dark dragon race's evil appetite. Even when Han Sho had lost his mind and attacked him viciously, he had never thought of resisting. This was just like the dark dragon race's lustful nature. It was an innate imprint of the giant dragon race that no one could change. The golden dragon was well aware of this race's characteristics, and immediately changed the meaning of resisting. He turned resisting Han Sho into saving Han Sho, so as to resolve the knot in Gilbert's nature. Indeed, as if he had been enlightened, the roars of the golden dragon and Cyclops woke up the muddle-headed Gilbert. After thinking it through, Gilbert frantically yelled, "That's right, I want to help you. Nothing can happen to you, your humble servant still needs your guidance." Roar! Han Sho, who was slowly descending towards the three colossuses, suddenly let out a ferocious howl. An unimaginably terrifying sound wave rushed straight towards them. Circles of murderous blood waves, like ripples on water, rolled in layers in the dusky void. The evil, murderous aura contained in the sound wave poured down from the sky in the form of burning clouds. Blood seeped out of the mouths, noses, and eyes of the three enormous beings under the impact of the terrifying sound wave. Their enormous bodies rolled about rapidly, unable to withstand the impact of the terrifying sound wave that was mixed with the murderous aura. "Damn it, what kind of attack method is your master using? Instead of letting him yell and scream, why don't we face his giant fists and feet? At least we can withstand the physical damage, but we can't do anything about this kind of sound wave attack." Blood as thick as a baby's arm seeped out of the golden dragon's lantern-sized eyes. Blood also flowed out of his ghastly mouth as he complained in agony. "Heavens, what the hell is going on? My master shouldn't be this strong." Gilbert had interacted with Han Sho for a long time. Although he wasn't very clear about Han Sho's true strength, from Han Sho's performance, it was absolutely impossible for him to possess such terrifying strength. "There's no other way. Let's combine our strength and attack him together. Otherwise, not only will we die without a doubt, he won't be able to escape the backlash of his strength and explode. The terrifying strength that shrouds his body right now comes from those fiends from the Forbidden Land. He must have wanted to absorb all of them, which is why this situation has occurred." The Cyclops was the calmest of the three enormous beings. Seeing that they were about to die from the impact of the sound wave if this continued, he immediately suggested anxiously. Then, without waiting for Gilbert to respond, the Cyclops and the Golden Dragon, who were supposed to be enemies, glanced at each other and actually stood up from their rolling positions in unison. Enduring the terrifying pain in their bodies, they charged straight at Han Sho, who was standing proudly in the air and surrounded by layers of murderous aura. Han Sho, who was roaring madly, sensed the unusual movements of the two enormous beings. He laughed sinisterly as he floated towards the two enormous beings. His blood-red pupils suddenly lit up with a brilliant crimson light. The crimson light overflowed from his pupils and condensed on the bodies of the two enormous beings as though it had materialized. The two enormous beings had just straightened their bodies when they were swept by his glistening bloody eyes. Their bodies were immediately invaded by a terrifying strength, and they actually began to tremble madly as if they had epilepsy. They let out mournful cries from their mouths. "Damned black dragon, you're right behind him. Subdue him immediately, or else we'll all die." When Han Shuo's blood-red pupils swept across the golden dragon's body, the tough dragon scales covering its body shattered with popping sounds. Fresh blood gushed out like a fountain. The golden dragon shook its head and wagged its tail as it dodged while howling miserably. "Hurry up, you're saving him, damned stupid dragon!" The Cyclops' green skin suddenly tore apart when the seemingly solid bloody light in Han Shuo's eyes landed on it. Then, the wound magically grew infinitely larger. Because his heart was filled with an unknown fear, he also let out a series of miserable cries. For the first time, he let out a howl of profanity. Amidst the frenzied roars of the two enormous beings, Gilbert yelled, "I'm going to save you, save you!" Resolute emotions appeared in Gilbert's enormous eyes. Then, Gilbert abruptly extended his enormous dragon claw, carefully swatting it towards the completely unaware Han Shuo who was standing proudly in front of him. He planned to first knock Han Shuo unconscious, then think of a way to restore Han Shuo's lost rationality and rescue Han Shuo from his current chaotic state. There was no need to doubt Gilbert's loyalty. Bam! A huge muffled sound rang out as a ball of red mist formed from murderous intent appeared above Han Shuo's head, tenaciously resisting Gilbert's claw. Han Shuo wasn't injured at all within the red mist, but he seemed to have sensed Gilbert's malice. He couldn't help but turn around and glare at Gilbert with his bloody eyes, roaring angrily. All of the chaotic murderous aura surrounding Han Shuo was affected by Han Shuo's rage, and immediately gathered from all directions, surging wildly into the demon's lair edge that had been floating in front of Han Shuo's chest. The enormous murderous aura was like waves of blood as it rapidly converged within the demon's lair edge. The demon's lair edge, which continued to hiss violently, suddenly exploded with a terrifying aura that could destroy the heavens and earth. When all of the murderous aura surrounding Han Shuo had been absorbed by the demon's lair edge, the demon's lair edge had become a peerless weapon that could split the heavens and earth. 100-meter-long blood-red light shot out from the demon's lair edge. Han Shuo, holding the sword hilt, was like a demon god that could destroy everything. Han Shuo adjusted the direction of the 100-meter-long light with his right arm, slowly aiming it at Gilbert. During this process, wherever the terrifying 100-meter-long aura passed, the air cracked, and the hard dark rocks that had existed for an unknown number of years were directly turned into stone chips flying everywhere under the violent aura. Faced with the boundless aura, Gilbert's enormous body appeared so small and helpless. His dragon eyes were filled with despair, fear, grief, and all sorts of emotions. He stared blankly at the ferocious Han Shuo and couldn't help but mutter, "No, you won't. You're my master, you can't really want to kill me. Stupid dragon, run! Hurry up and run!" The Cyclops and the Golden Dragon frantically reminded him at the same time. For some reason, the hearts of the two enormous beings were also filled with grief at this moment. However, the normally carefree Gilbert who liked to hoot crazily was stupefied, as if he had become an idiot. His lantern-sized eyes gradually overflowed with blood-colored tears, but his body remained unmoving, as if it had taken root. An earth-shattering roar rang out from the mouth of the ferocious, red-eyed Han Shuo. The 100-meter-long demon's lair edge that possessed the power to annihilate the heavens and earth was finally slowly raised and aimed at Gilbert. The Cyclops and the Golden Dragon didn't doubt that as long as this edge descended, Gilbert would absolutely be torn into pieces of fresh meat. He would have no hope of surviving, and all traces of life would be completely erased. "No!" A crazed howl rang out from the mouth of the crimson-eyed Han Shuo. It was only now that Han Shuo finally spat out a clear human voice. His face was filled with an expression of pain and struggle. As he roared with unwillingness, his entire body was enveloped by black lightning. The blood vessels on his neck and arms ruptured with popping sounds, spraying blood all over his body. However, Han Sho didn't seem to notice the frightening injuries on his body at all. He seemed to be unable to control his limbs, his expression twisted in pain as he stared at his right hand with his bloodshot eyes. He continuously roared, "No, no!" Suddenly, Han Sho's expression hardened. His bloody left hand abruptly smashed towards his right arm that held the demon's lair edge. The blow fell like lightning, accompanied by a crisp creaking sound. Arrows of blood shot out from both of his arms at the same time, spraying out in all directions. Such a self-harming attack obviously produced a miraculous effect, saving Gilbert's precious life. His right hand clenched tightly onto the 100-meter-long blade, and a change immediately took place. The 100-meter-long edge that had been attacking Gilbert suddenly changed direction, narrowly bypassing Gilbert's enormous body. It carried a ruthless, evil, and fierce sword aura that could destroy everything as it shot towards the boundless forbidden area shrouded in black fog. Suddenly, the entire sky above the forbidden area within a 10-kilometer radius was filled with blood-red light. The earth shook violently as a terrifying explosion filled the entire forbidden area. It was as if the heavens and earth had been destroyed by the terrifying explosion. The black fog that had enveloped the forbidden area for 500 years slowly dissipated as the blood-red light tore through it. Rays of warm and bright sunlight penetrated through the obstacles that had shrouded the place for 100 years, sprinkling all over the dark and desolate forbidden land, landing on the two colossi covered in cuts and bruises, on Han Sho who was gasping for breath in a pool of blood but whose eyes had regained clarity, and on the dark dragon Gilbert whose eyes were brimming with tears as he revealed an expression of ecstasy. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.